Prior to becoming one of the strongest character specialists and most successful content creators in the Street Fighter scene, Broski got to start dabbling in online lobbies for Street Fighter 4 with his friends and posting meme clips on YouTube. In the final years of Street Fighter 4, he discovered a local gathering and made his first trip to play offline, despite his initial doubts.
I actually got super anxious. Like, I was like, do I even belong here?
Getting over this fear opened his eyes up to the greater Street Fighter competitive scene. With the release of Street Fighter 5 around the corner, Broski prepared to go all in.
Street Fighter 5 was where, I really started thinking, like, I want to play this, I want to get good at this.
With the esports bubble on the rise, he found his opportunity in the world of competitive Street Fighter with the Gfinity Elite Series, netting him his first full-time sponsorship and a taste of what the professional gaming life could be like.
Because that also gave me more opportunities to travel, more opportunities to compete.
With the rise of this wave, he made the decision to switch to part-time work to focus more on his Street Fighter career in late 2019, unaware that soon the bubble would burst and the pandemic would bring the esports scene to a halt.
Which probably wasn't a very good idea. I was kind of swept up in like Gfinity madness at the time.
With the world in lockdown and a brand new main in Oro to explore, Broski made the decision to invest more into streaming and content creation. With more time to practice and a passion to develop his Oro play, Broski saw his results steadily improve in the now online-only CPT circuit. This success culminated with his first appearance on Street Fighter League EU, where he played a pivotal role in leading his team Mouse to victory.
Because I was going into it like, I'm going to ruin someone's day-to-day with Oro. Every single person I spoke to there was like, I don't want to play against you.
After the release of Street Fighter 6, Broski initially settled into JP for his first competitive character, but didn't quite find his calling until A.K.I released.
Then A.K.I came out a few months later, and I just clicked instantly.
With his new main in hand, Broski would close out Season 1 strong with a World Warrior win under his belt and a third-place finish in the regional finals. With Season 2 underway, A.K.I received a significant number of buffs, and Broski was ready to capitalize. After securing his spot in the winner's side of UK and Ireland regional finals, Broski took down the competition, including EVO third-place finisher Ending Walker, to secure his first ever Capcom Cup qualification. On this episode of Trash Talk, we cover Broski's journey from beginner Street Fighter player to Capcom Cup qualifier, the secrets behind his content creation success, and why A.K.I is cool. Please enjoy. Broski. Now, normally I kind of fade these in with like a normal conversation sort of tone, but I figured this would be a good chance to embarrass both of us, so I prepared a little intro. So here we go. Broski, not just any Broski, Capcom Cup qualified Broski. Long ways from the Dark Souls manly fisticuffs, Pyro TF2, and Robert Mate days Broski. 5+ hour Dhalsim tutorials, 4-bar Oro Tengu Stone combo, Street Fighter League EU finals. No longer with the long hair, now content creator extraordinaire, A.K.I specialist no one else compares. In Capcom Cup, he just can't fail. Broski, how are you doing today?
That's such a deep cut. I was not ready for that at all. The Dark Souls manly fisticuffs? That was like I think that was my first ever YouTube video. It was like one of the oldest ones on my old channel. Holy hell. I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm glad you caught that. Yes, because I was doing my research for this, and just before, like a couple hours ago, I stumbled upon the archive because I knew you had this 5-hour Dhalsim tutorial from back in the Street Fighter 5 days, but I didn't know how deep it went because I was trying to do a lot of research into figuring out like what you were up to Street Fighter 4 days. And then I realized, I was like, I don't see any tournament results, any footage. And I'm like, I know you played Street Fighter 4 heavy based on what you've talked about. And, you've done a lot of content videos on it. But I was like, where is the footage? Where's the result? I went through every EU result. I was like searching for Broski everywhere. And then I stumbled upon your old YouTube channel. I was like, oh, this is the source of it all. So you have videos going back like 12 years ago under the tag also of Robert Mate.
Oh man, yeah, that was my old that was my Xbox Live tag. Yeah, a bunch of me and my friends we had this stupid like clan thing where we'd add mate to the end of our names. So yeah, that was like, man, this is like a Nardwar situation. You've gone for a real deep cut today, huh?
That was the goal. I'm glad you picked up on it. Yeah, there's all your old gameplay videos and then stuff that you've all referenced through your streams and content later on. So I was kind of happy to actually find it because I didn't realize you had a second channel. So yeah, it's an interesting archive of history. But with that, it proved that you did play Street Fighter 4 at that time because I was like, where's the footage? Because I went through all the CPT events. I went through as many brackets as I could dig up looking for the name Broski anywhere. The London, the Meltdown weeklies, like WSO. I was trying to dig up as many deep cuts as I can think of from the weeklies in the UK scene. And you weren't really in there yet. So I don't know if there's something under Robert Mate that happened, but at this time, what was going on?
I didn't compete back then. Basically, is what it came down to. Like, I played the game a ton, Street Fighter 4 throughout its life, but I didn't even start even thinking about doing tournaments until like late into Ultra. And even then, like, I only probably went to about like 2 or 3 events before the game died. So like, yeah, I wasn't really competing. And I didn't know like any of the London scene until, you know, Street Fighter 5 came around. So yeah, that was before my time.
Okay. So you're just playing heavily online with like your friends at this time because you're pretty good. I mean, you're doing fancy combos. You have a bunch of clips of stuff like, and the way you talked about Street Fighter 4 also, like you clearly knew your stuff. Like you've always been a very technical player and someone who likes to push the limits of a character in an engine. And even in you reflecting on that game, it showed. So you were just achieving this level just purely disconnected from the greater tournament scene at this time.
Yeah, pretty much. Like, I would follow the game in like a technical sense. So like occasionally I would look at like the Shoryuken forums and stuff like that. I would occasionally like see combo videos, that kind of stuff. I was more interested in, like you say, like the technical side of things. And to be honest, I wasn't even that aware of there being this huge, you know, competitive component to it. Like I knew tournaments existed, but I just didn't know about that side of things. I was just more interested in like doing cool combos with my friends and stuff in lobbies.
Right. Okay. So when did you start to become more aware of the greater tournament scene and like the scale of it all?
I think it would have been like probably the last year or two of Street Fighter 4. It was, I'm trying to remember, it's a long time ago. Yeah, I think I became aware that there was a local or local-ish near me that was in a city called Southampton in the UK. And it was about an hour's train ride to get there. And I was just kind of curious, like how does a tournament even operate? Like I was going more out of curiosity just to sort of see like what does competitive Street Fighter even look like, having only ever really just like focused on like grinding ranked and lobbies and stuff. And so that was where I got my start. I went to a couple of tournaments there, got absolutely washed. I think I 0-2'd probably my first couple of tournaments. But I guess, yeah, that was where I sort of started to realize, oh, this is actually a big thing, you know, talking to people at that event sort of gave me the scale for how big this stuff is, because obviously Street Fighter 4 competitively was a lot smaller than things are today in terms of like esports and stuff, but even still, there was the early Capcom Cups and like Evo and stuff, like, were still pretty huge. So like I talked to a few people at the local and they were like, oh yeah, man, there's these like, you know, tournaments with like 500, 600, 700 people or even more going to them, and like it kind of surprised me because I just wasn't aware that was a thing.
Yeah, at that time, like the last few years of Street Fighter 4, that's when it was really coming together in terms of like a circuit. EVO was already huge. Like there was already big events going on, like you mentioned, but especially 2014, 2015. 2013, there was the first proto Capcom Cup, which is more like an invitational, and I don't know, it was like a new thing. We didn't really know what it was yet, but those last few years, especially 2015, there was a cohesive circuit and like a unity to the whole season. So it was really big at that time. But it's interesting to hear that you didn't really know about it for so long while playing so heavy, but you were still rather, you know, you're a strong player or competent. I don't know if I want to say, like, you weren't winning tournaments like you mentioned, but you didn't show up to that local having any sort of like, oh, I'm so good online, I'm going to win. Like there wasn't any sense of that, because that's a common theme.
I'll be completely honest with you, okay? The very first time that I went to an offline local, which as I say was the one in Southampton, I actually got super anxious. Like I was like, do I even belong here? Like I've played so much of the game, but I was like, man, am I even qualified to go to locals? And it's a thing that I see a lot of people say. Like people will come into my stream chat and say like, am I good enough to go to locals yet? And it's like such a misunderstanding of the point of locals, but it's very common. And so I felt like really out of place. Like I felt like everyone here knows each other. They're all good players. Like did I make a mistake coming here? So, you know, I don't think I was bad at the game competitively, but it was just I didn't have this sense that like offline events could serve like a social purpose, you know? I just felt like everyone here is an expert and I'm probably going to be laughed out the door for daring to set foot in this venue, you know. I was very nervous at my first couple of offline tournaments.
Interesting. That is one of the two reactions you tend to see, right? It's one of the extremes. It's like what you mentioned. am I qualified to enter? And people like, I always laugh at that comment, not to laugh at the person mentioning it, but how much of a misunderstanding it is. Like you mentioned, people always be like, wow, you went to Evo. like going to Evo is a sign that you are of the caliber to win Evo. Like you don't. And I'm like, yeah, so did 5,000 other people who went 0-2 and hung out for a weekend, right? And so there is a common misunderstanding that you have to be so tall to ride, so your MR must be this high to show up to the tournament, when that really isn't the case. It's much more of a social setting and an opportunity to train with each other and to make connections. But on the other hand, there's also people who think, they're a big fish in a small pond. They think, oh, I'm godlike. And then they show it to the local and they're like, wait a minute, they have to reset their expectations of the scale a little bit. So it's interesting to hear what side you fell on. I kind of love when people get their ego completely burst when they go to their first tournament. But that's interesting to hear that you were actually nervous about it. So these first couple of tournaments you started going to, did that incentivize you to keep training and keep pursuing this? Or was that like ego bruising and you're like, never mind this, maybe this isn't for me? I'm guessing it's the other, but I'm wondering how you felt after.
It kind of wasn't really both. I enjoyed competing what little I did at the end of Street Fighter 4, but I constantly had this feeling like I was too late. I'd arrived at the end of something. So like I didn't get too invested in it because I felt like, this game has already been out for, I think Ultra was probably like, what was it, about 4 or 5 years deep into its life by that point, the Street Fighter 4 series, and like, champions had been named, people already had like huge reputations in the game. I just felt like I was arriving at the end of something. So kind of what I decided to do was just keep playing the game casually. But I was like, when the next game comes out, I want to be there on like day one. I want to hit the ground running and like learn that one alongside everyone else, so I don't feel like I'm playing catch up. So that's why like Street Fighter 5 was where, I really actually started thinking like, I want to play this, I want to get good at this, and I want to actually like compete properly in this game.
Okay, that makes sense because your results. There's a lot more recorded history this time, and just in general, we recorded our results better in the Street Fighter 5 era. But even in 2017, you're cracking 9th place at CPT. I guess it's maybe a ranking. The one I see is EGX 2017. I'm not sure if that was a Premier or ranking at the time, but you're already Premier. Okay, so even just 2 years into it, it says here in Wikipedia Tier 1. It must be Premier. So you got 9th place at a Premier 2017. But I don't see anything for 2016 itself. So how did 2016 go? Did you go to any actual CPT events, or were you playing online? Any locals?
I think 2016, I might have gone to... I think I went to one CPT event. I think I might have gone to EGX in 2016. But I think that one might have been only like a month or two after the game came out. So I was, it was very early days and I was still like learning everything. So I think I got like, I don't know, barely scraped top 64 or something. I can't remember. But I don't think I was like confident in like my play at all for at least the first like year. But as you said, like 2017 is where I started to like compete a bit more, and I started to talk to a few more of like the UK players. I remember it was kind of funny because like no one had any idea who I was, and there was all the I later found out there was like a bunch of people like doing conspiracy theories about like whose secret account this is. They're like, oh, there's this guy Broski, and we all think it's like this person on a secret backup account that used to play like Street Fighter 4 Dhalsim. And I had to be like, nope, I'm just a different person. But there was a lot of people like throwing accusations that I was like someone else's Smurf account at the time.
Interesting. That's a common theme that I have whenever I play somebody good online. People are like, who is this? And I'll just read their CFN name. Oh, I believe it's so-and-so, There is always a sentiment that like if someone is performing well and you haven't heard of them before, it must be somebody else. You definitely see that a lot. But did any of them figure out that it was Robert Mate the whole time? Like, did they piece it together?
I don't think anyone made the link, but I don't blame them for not doing it because it was just too tenuous. There was no connection between like the Street Fighter 4 era and the Street Fighter 5 era. Like you wouldn't see like one random Hugo player in Street Fighter 4 and then like one random Dhalsim player in 5 and go, oh, that must be the same guy. Completely different names, completely different characters. So
yeah, Hugo to Dhalsim. So in Street Fighter 5, did you immediately settle on Dhalsim in the first season? Because that is kind of
on day one.
Big switch.
Yeah, I mean, it's a weird one, and it's hard to explain why I like characters going from game to game, because I kind of jump all over different archetypes. But like the one thing that I definitely felt early in Street Fighter V was I hate getting jumped on in this game. And because especially, I don't know if you remember in season 1 of Street Fighter V, jumps were monstrous. Like half the cast, like Ryu's jump light kick was broken. There was a bunch of characters that could just win the game by pressing up forward. So like one of my very first priorities was like, I need to find a character that can do a fat combo on an anti-air. And like in season 1, it was basically only Dhalsim with the back heavy punch stuff. Like that was what first got me interested, because I just was like, I want to be able to kill people if they jump at me, and like Dhalsim was the best at doing that at the time, and I just ended up really liking him.
Okay, and that was the crush counter one, right? The 2 arms going diagonally up. Okay, right. Makes sense. Yeah, in season 1, it wasn't just that the hitboxes were busted, like Ryu jump light kick was absurd. It was also the 8 frames of input delay. Like there was a lot of factors on top of just the hitboxes itself that made it very hard to stop what seemed like scrubby gameplay. It was a frustrating time for sure. Season 1 of Street Fighter V was butt ugly in retrospect. But come season 2, in some ways it got uglier depending on who you ask. I feel like season 2 was much improved over season 1. You're starting to go to some tournaments, but it really wasn't until season 3 that like your name is on a bunch of tournament results. So what was that transition like? Is it just you dedicating more time to travel? Are you starting to see more results at locals? Like, what was the source of that ramp up in 2018?
I think a big part of it came about because of this thing called the Gfinity, which was the kind of proto Street Fighter League. So for anyone who don't know, there was this thing in Europe we had called the Gfinity Elite Series, which was a team-based event, and basically, there's a kind of funny story behind it, which is that this organization, Gfinity, just popped up out of nowhere, basically, with like, I don't know if you've seen these like events sometimes where like an organization will just show up with a lot of money, and they'll be like, hey, we're running tournaments with obscene prize pools and no promotion and no like FGC connections. And basically that happened. There was this thing called the Gfinity Challenger Series, which was online tournaments for Street Fighter V. And they used to run them 5 days a week, every single week, every weekday, and no promotion, no connections within the FGC, and every single one had, I think, a £500 or £600 prize pot, which is like, I don't know, $700 or $800. And me and Hurricane were basically the only people who knew about this tournament. So every single day we would get in from work at like 5 o'clock, we would log on to Street Fighter V, we would play this tiny little like 5-man online tournament because it was just so unknown, and then every day we would collect a few £100 of prize money. And it was like the bank was open for like 3 months straight until like word of mouth eventually got out that this tournament existed. And it all ended up culminating in the Gfinity Elite Series, which was like an offline team-based things. And they recruited players for that from the online series. So that's kind of how I got my first big move into like mainstream esports stuff, was because they were looking at like which players have performed well in these online tournaments. And I got picked up by a team called Endpoint at the time. And that's kind of where it kind of took off from there, because that also gave me more opportunities to travel, more opportunities to compete, more like social chances to like hang out with the UK players and the EU players. So I got to know more people, and then like I'd started like organizing, sharing hotel rooms with people when we traveled to events, that kind of stuff. So I would say that like the big transitionary point from like me just entering tournaments as kind of just a solo random competitor to like joining something and being more like at the forefront of it was when the Gfinity stuff all kicked off.
Right. If the NA audience is watching this, I think a sort of equivalent series might have been E-League in US, where they had some online events as well, where they were handing out cash. And I remember there was like a offline showdown between Samurai and Shine to what was like a 1st to 2 for $5,000. I got flown out to an event just to play one single 1st to 2, and then I believe, was it Samurai? I think Shine won that one. They just handed him a big check. It's like, okay, cool, thanks, gotta go. But they also did the bigger E-League Invitational, which was like for hundreds of thousands of dollars. And I think Gfinity was a sort of EU equivalent to that at the time, but also with the team format. And that really was the era of like this massive gold rush in esports, and Street Fighter was kind of like pulled into that in a lot of ways, like the 2017 to 2019 era. There were so many random organizations and random ways to make money, and esports investors were just throwing around capital left and right, and it would fall into the laps of random players, and they're like, okay, cool, thanks. And then none of this exists a few years later. So it was a very interesting time. But you mentioned, what was the first team you were a part of? You mentioned, because I know you were on Method.
So I was on Team Endpoint in the first and second seasons, and then I switched to Team Method after that. Yeah.
I was curious about that participation in that team. Was that just exclusively for Gfinity, or did they also like sponsor you for non-Gfinity related events?
It was a full-time sponsorship. That as you say, this was kind of like a weird time where there was a shocking amount of money going around for Street Fighter V. I kind of was just in the right place at the right time, and all of the teams that were like franchised into Gfinity, kind of like we have now with SFL, where there's like a bunch of esports teams that like pick up 4 players to represent them. It was like that, so it wasn't just representing them at Gfinity. It was just like, full sponsorship. Obviously everyone had different contracts, everyone had different perks, but I got a little bit of a travel allowance, and it worked out pretty well for me.
Interesting. Yeah, it was really easy to get sponsored back then, relatively. I still remember to this day when I had a match 2017 final round when I lost to Momochi, and that was kind of like a mini viral moment almost from that tournament. I got sponsorship offers from that for losing.
Damn.
Like I had random people trying to pay me to go to tournaments for losing, and I'm like, what's going on here? It was a very crazy. Different era than today. Yeah,
I mean, like, at that time, I would say, because of Gfinity, I would estimate like maybe the top 30 or 40 players in Europe were all on sponsored contracts, which is like unthinkable now. Like right now in Europe, there's maybe 5 players I could name off the top of my head that are, like full-time pros. It's so surreal to think about how different things were just like, 6 or 7 years ago.
Right, like top 30 to 40 to top 3 to 4.
Yeah,
like,
pretty much.
Like no one is actually a full-time pro, but that was still definitely more than the NA scene. I would say like the Gfinity boost was very real. We could see it from this side of the pond. It's like, wow, they have this whole league format, and everyone's on. Who are all these teams? We see all these acronyms in front of everyone's name. It was very interesting. There was definitely some salty American players at the time. I could recall. But it was awesome to see that these opportunities were happening, even though, I think there was still a sense that where's all this money going? What's going to happen? Like, I think everyone sort of knew that it wasn't going to last.
Because I was so new to it at the time, I didn't have that perspective that, like, this is probably not going to last. Like, I was kind of swept up in the heat of it. Like, oh man, Street Fighter is the future. Esports is the future. Infinite money coming in all directions from all of these sponsors and stuff. And like, Now I've had time to sort of look at this like boom and bust cycle that esports goes through. I'm like, oh man, this is not sustainable at all. It's crazy.
Yeah, very true. So at this time though, you're still I'm assuming this is when you're working full time, 2017, or are you? Because I believe you went to university and started working, right? This is kind of your.
I'm trying to put up the time limit. Yeah, so I went to university and then I was working full time after that, until about it was just before the pandemic, so about 2019 I switched to part-time work and part-time Street Fighter as like a compromise, which probably wasn't a very good idea at the time. I think that, like I said, I was kind of swept up in like Gfinity madness at the time, thinking that this was the future, this is where it's all going. So that's been like the way that I've kept things, until now pretty much. So I'm still doing like 50% Street Fighter and 50% normal job stuff.
Interesting. I mean, I would like to delve into that as much as you're willing to share, because that's something very interesting to me specifically. So can you share then, I guess starting 2019, how is your time divvied up between, work life, Street Fighter life, and then whatever's left over for personal life? Because I know for me personally, that last part kind of gets thrown out the window sometimes to make things work. Can you kind of break down maybe an average week and how you allocate your time?
Yeah, so like I stream Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and I have done, since for quite some time now, quite a few years. And so I work Tuesday, Thursday, and alternate Saturdays, depending on a bunch of factors. But basically, what I try and do is like keep like a clear cut between each day. So like I know that like Monday is my streaming day. That's when I'm in Street Fighter mode. Tuesday is my non-Street Fighter day. That's when I'm in proper functional human being mode. And like I've kept that routine for so long now that it just feels normal to me. But yeah, it's not been too bad though, because like even when you go like part-time Street Fighter, I still find that I have a lot of time in the day. Like I'm sort of baffled by players that are like full-time pros, because I don't really understand what you're doing all day. Is that something you've thought about? I don't know.
Oh god, it blows my mind. Yeah, I think there's a handful of full-time pros where I've talked to them and I get the sense like, yeah, you're a professional, right? Like I just did the discussion with Mena, and when I get to talk with Mena about how he structures his day and what he does, I'm like, okay, I can see this being a 9 to 5, right? Like maybe the hours together aren't like a solid block like you would have with a normal office job or normal place of employment, but I can see him investing his life, like he is grounded in this and he's working towards a goal constantly. But for years, talking to other pros, especially my same era of 2017 to 2019, traveling while working full time myself and like really losing all my sleep, all my free time making this happen, I was constantly like, what the hell are you doing? Because I would talk to some people and I'm like, you don't have a job, do you? And what are you doing with your time? And you're not winning every tournament. Like even the economics of it all, we're all friendly, but I wasn't, close enough with every one of those people to really say, hey, break down your balance, your like budget,
I need
your
to
income.
See from like 7 a.m. to like 11 p.m. Like, I need to see like what is actually happening hour by hour. Please break that down for me. But like, it's too rude. Right. You can't ask that.
Right. And even just how they're surviving with money, because I was always like, that was the dream at the time, right? Be a full-time professional player, exist in this space, being able to make a living from your passion. And then you saw some people were alive from their passion, and I'm like, are you making a living? Like what's actually happening here? It was very mysterious. So I'm happy to see you kind of thought through that same thing. But then you actually made that jump in 2019. So what was your reasoning at that time? Like, how did you come to the conclusion, like, I can afford this? And also, how did you even find a work situation to make that viable? I'm kind of curious about that.
So I couldn't afford it at first, if I'm being completely honest. I was kind of scraping by for a little while. It was a pretty optimistic decision to go with. Because like obviously right now, like like my stream, I'm really proud to say is going really well right now. But like pre-pandemic, it was a passion project really. I was just streaming because I would have played anyway. It was kind of that situation where like if I wasn't streaming, I would have just been grinding ranked at home. So like I might as well just turn on Twitch. But yeah, at the start, it was probably not, like I said, not a very sensible decision to do that. I spent a lot of time thinking like, have I made a mistake here? Am I kind of ruining my life? Had a lot of, staying up late thinking about that kind of stuff. And I was very lucky actually, because my boss at the time, which is my previous job, basically said like, if you ever decide that you want to come back full time, we'll happily have you on. So I was really lucky that if it didn't work out, and if this like 50-50 split between normal job and Street Fighter stuff, fell apart, then I had kind of a contingency for it. So that helped a lot, I think, having that backup available to me.
Yeah, that's really a blessing right there, to have someone who understands. Well, so did they know specifically what you're doing? It wasn't, hey, I'm going to come to work half as often. Can you let me do that?
I was kind of cagey about the details. I was just like, I need to switch to part-time just to like pursue a personal project. I was very like non-committal about the whole thing. Like I did mention, I wasn't hiding anything. Like at work, I would talk to people and say like, oh, I'm going to a tournament this weekend. Water cooler conversations about playing Street Fighter and stuff like that. But I was very cagey about like the details of like exactly why I was switching to part-time. But to be honest, if I had been honest about it, I don't think he would have cared at all. But I just felt like it was an admission of weakness if I actually said it.
Yeah, it's such a weird line that we ride, really, because in my situation with work, I try to not tell anybody what I'm doing, really. I mean, like, if they asked, I would explain a little bit, but I did not want any attention in the office from that. But once it got out, like, I remember in 2017, since I would leave on a Friday early and then come back Monday, barely functional, because I would go to the airport Friday afternoon a little bit early, especially if it was a tournament on the East Coast where it's an hour time save, so I could maybe get a super early flight and get into the office straight from the airport, right? And so eventually they're like, hey, what are you doing? Like, I was clearly not living the same work-life balance that they were. And so some of them knew, and then when that got out, it's like, you know, they like, oh, Brian, there's a video game coming out. Like, oh, did you see about this video? You know, like, they're trying to relate to you. And I'm like, cool, yeah. Oh, like, a kid won $1 million playing Fortnite. Yeah, awesome. You know, like, any video game news became the talk of the town. That's kind of
where I'm at, which is like, as you say, I'm not hiding it, but I'm just like, if you ask about it, I'll tell you. But the problem is that, like, and people try and be like, they're trying to be friendly, they're trying to be polite, but like, a lot of people's understanding of like esports and video games is basically zero. So like, they might be like, oh, I heard there's a new you know, Call of Duty coming out. Are you going to be like a world champion in that? And I'm like, oh man, just like awkwardly work through that conversation. But,
and then you feel the need to, like, the pressure at least to be like, no, this is a real thing. You know, any conversation where you're in a workplace environment and you feel pressure to, like, reassure them, like, no, I swear to you, this is a legitimate competitive sector with real prospects. It's just not a good position to be in. Yeah. So it's funny how you went through that parallel experience, and but that's very amazing that your place of work, your boss was able to at least give you that reassurance to let you make this leap. And you said this was 2019. So was this early 2019, Season 4 of Street Fighter V, or was this towards the end?
I can't actually remember exactly when I made the switch. Like, I want to say it would have been mid-2019, but I couldn't tell you exactly when.
Okay. But this was after your 2018 season, which I actually pulled up the numbers. Luckily, Capcom has the archives. You were ranked 63rd globally, and 12th in EMEA, the European region, which is pretty solid. I mean, people might look at that and not know the context, but to do those kind of numbers, to be ranked 63rd in the world at that time, you're competing with world-class players who are on a plane every weekend, going to every single tournament across the world, right?
Yeah,
like,
it was crazy.
The point inflation, once you got towards the 50s and above, it was just exponentially increasing because the best players were winning more and going to every tournament. So if you didn't go to every tournament, you couldn't keep up. But you had some really good showings, a couple of top 8s, and then even EVO 2018, you got top 32. And I think that was your first overseas tournament. Am I correct?
It was my first EVO, my first American tournament. I had traveled to EU events before that, but that was my first time outside of Europe. Yeah.
Okay, so was that your first time, like, overseas period?
No. Like I said, I traveled within Europe, so I've like flown to the EU CPT events,
but not over an ocean, right? I guess I'm trying to make that distinction. To me, it's international.
When you say overseas,
technically,
I take that as meaning like foreign countries at all, but you mean like actually going over like the Atlantic or whatever.
As an American, I have to make this distinction because. Your countries are fake countries, okay? They're states.
Understood. Well, I mean, I had flown to... I went to the Maldives once for like a family holiday, which is like out in the Indian Ocean. But like in terms of like Street Fighter stuff, yeah, that was my first time traveling, a long distance, yeah. Right.
Okay, and that's a really good result for being your first tournament like that. I mean, you're dealing with jet lag, I'm assuming, to a degree, brand new environment. So what was that tournament run like at EVO?
I don't remember too much about the tournament run. I remember, quite unfortunately, that I had to play Infectious, which was a shame because, like, traveling halfway across the world and then having to, like, go up against another UK player that I played all the time anyway was a little bit annoying, which I guess is a topic that will come up when we discuss Capcom Cup in the future, possibly. But yeah, so I remember that I managed to beat Infectious at that, Dhalsim versus Nakali. And I think I lost to Fudo. I definitely lost to Fudo. I got absolutely washed by Fudo. I remember that much. That was like Fudo when he was like unstoppable.
Right. Until grand finals, but
y-
second place
yeah.
Fudo.
Yeah. And I can't remember. I don't even remember who I lost to. I think it might have been Tampa Bison, possibly.
Close. You lost to Toy, who was the NA and Bison player at the time. And when going through this, I found another deep cut. We were one round away from playing each other, actually, because I lost to Toy the round before, and it was like last game, last round, plus a draw game in between, where I would have won 2-0. Had a whole whole event, had to have a TO come by. I knew the rule, which is we replay, but I had a TO come by just to tell us the rule. So yeah, I looked back in the bracket. I was like, "Oh man, we almost crossed paths way back then." But yeah, that was a really good run that Evo, and then 2019. You have a few strong results. So I'm kind of, but you weren't winning 2019. Like you weren't still cracking into like a consistent top 3 finish at these premieres. So you make this jump though, regardless of having like consistent tournament winnings at this time. I'm also assuming Gfinity was making some income as well. Was there any other income streams to influence that? Because you were on Team Method. Were they actually providing you a salary at that time? Like, what was there any other incentive besides like the prospect of having more time to become the best to make that jump?
I was getting a salary from Method at the time, so that was enough to like supplement the fact that I was only working part time. So that was enough to keep me afloat at the time, and at least until Gfinity finished. Then things got a little bit hairy for a while. That was when I most strongly considered like returning to full-time work. Was like when Gfinity packed up. I was like, oh, is this all over now? Is the esports dead forever? So there was a period of time there where things were a little bit murky, like sort of 2019 going to 2020, where it became clear that like this wasn't that sustainable, and I decided to stick it out for a little bit. And going forward from there, that's like. Then we get into like the pandemic territory, and that's when like streaming became like a big part of what I was going for, because that's when I kind of transitioned from like streaming as a thing that I was just doing because I was playing the game anyway, to streaming that I actually did because I felt like this was like a big component of what I want to do. That's kind of when I became a streamer, if that makes sense. Yeah,
that makes perfect sense, because there's so many players who I would say are players who happen to stream their play, right? They're not really streamers in my mind. And I think the big component of that to me is like focusing on YouTube. Like, I think if you are a streamer now and you don't have a YouTube component, like you're not a streamer. I don't know. Like, unless you're someone who went completely viral outside of like this niche esports scene, and you're just there's clips of you all over the internet and on TikTok, and that's how you make your streaming income and grow your audience. If you're not focusing on YouTube, I feel like you're spinning your wheels, like you're wasting your time, because you just can't grow organically on Twitch. And I know you picked up on that, and I remember, or I checked your first video, September 6th, 2021, your first video on your new channel, post A.K.I. Broski, Psych You Thought. Do you remember what this video is?
I have absolutely no idea what that video is.
I was trying to see if you can remember.
This was back when the channel was the Clips channel. I know that much, but I couldn't tell you what was in it.
It was like a 10-second clip of you doing Oro fast fall to bait out Guile's flash kick.
Oh man!
And then a nice little punish. That was a good time to start a clips channel, because it's very easy to clip farm at that time.
Yeah, you're kind of like the person that got me into it, because that was when you were like fully on the clips grind, I think, as well. So like I was kind of like, well, I was basically copying you, is what I'm saying here. I was copying the Brian F approach shamelessly, if I'm being honest, because it's easy. Like clips is so easy. The YouTube meta has kind of changed a lot in the last couple of years, but there was a brief period, 2021, where the clips just went crazy. I would just upload like a clip every day, 30 seconds or whatever, and it would just consistently get a lot of views without doing anything. So that's kind of how I got started doing YouTube stuff, when the clips meta was at its peak.
Yeah, I remember you asking me about some YouTube questions, and I was super happy to see it. And that was something that I was pushing at the time. Like I shared the clips channel, then I shared the success, and all of 2020, especially when once COVID happened, everyone's going remote. People aren't traveling as much, and that's when I also started focusing on YouTube more. I was just pushing like, please, somebody else do this. Like, you are all wasting your time and your talents if you're not trying on YouTube, because your stream will not grow. And so you were one of the few people who really looked at that and started at least copying and pasting, because it's such an easy formula to start with, especially at the time. And the clips were, it was weird. It was like a lottery ticket almost, because I would try to do 2 a day, and I would maybe do them in bulk. Like at the end of the week, I would like look at my stream, watch it on 2 times speed, and just be like, oh, okay, clip, clip.
Yeah.
And then the thumbnail, you would just zoom in on a good screen moment, and maybe I would sometimes stretch something out or whatever.
Yeah, the laser red eyes. That's a classic.
Yeah. Slap something on it, and then you might make $5 from a clip. You might make $100 from a clip, right? It was kind of like a lottery ticket, and it would advertise your stream, and then so many new people would find your stream. So when you finally started doing that, I was like, yes, like somebody else is taking the easy formula and finding success with it. So did you start to see an immediate like return on your Twitch stream once you started doing the YouTube like that? I
think I did, but it kind of plateaued quite quickly. So like I definitely noticed like an initial kind of rush of people that were like, hey, just found out about you from like Clips channels and stuff, lots of people coming through that way. But I feel like Clips channels kind of have like a limit of how far they can go. Like you can't build up a Clips channel forever. You're gonna it kind of stagnates, I think, just inevitably because of the format. So but I did notice an increase for sure. Like that sort of like YouTube sending people to Twitch and then Twitch sending people to YouTube, that like circle of content was definitely noticeable. Yeah, and I think you have to invest in that, because just the way the platform of Twitch works is just the rich get richer. There's no discoverability on that. So if anyone's listening to this and interested in doing content creation, especially in any kind of saturated field like esports types of games and Street Fighter, if you're not already in the top 3 or 5 whatever streams, people are not going to scroll down to find your stream. It's just not going to happen. So you need something algorithmically driven to lure in people's attention and then potentially build an audience from that, which is YouTube. And YouTube has far more users, far more users than Twitch. Like there's just so many more people out there on YouTube. So you got to invest in that. And you were doing that at that time, but also at that time, we already alluded to it or mentioned it, was Oro. So like you're playing primarily Dhalsim, and then the online era is happening because of COVID. You're now doing this part-time thing, and I'm guessing now remote as well. Is that correct? Yes, during the pandemic. Okay, so that's kind of like another X factor, I think, in your journey. If I'm assuming here, maybe you can correct me, but I think not having to go to the office, staying home, you might be able to squeeze in a set here or there, have Street Fighter on the other monitor. You don't have to confirm or deny any of this for your employer watching. If my boss is watching right now, I promise you I did not do any of the things that Mr. F is currently accusing me of. Right, but you could have, and that could have contributed to you finding a lot more success, because in 2020, there's all these Salt Mine League events going on, and it looks like maybe this is just results bias, but you're starting to win a lot of these Salt Mine League online weeklies, which feature some of the strongest players in all of Europe. Win, or top 3 at least. Your results are getting really consistent with Dhalsim at this time. Did you notice like your relative level with your European competitors increasing, or is this just kind of like the people who are still participating weren't keeping up with you? And because at this time some players weren't necessarily grinding as hard because things were shaky. Like what did you feel that era was like for you? I think I was still improving at that time, but I also think that was you were starting to see kind of an exodus from Street Fighter V at that point, I think, because it was like the game was now 3 or 4 years deep at that point, and a lot of the people who had stuck around for like season 1 and 2, I noticed quite a few competitive players started to fade away. Like for example, Valmaster, who did come back towards the end, lost interest by that point. So I did feel like I was getting better, but I also felt like quite a few of the top players were kind of like starting to fall away from the game a little bit. So it's a bit of both. Okay, yeah, there was definitely this sense of players not participating, and also for people who started in Street Fighter 6, the legitimacy of online gameplay
did not exist back then, right? Like 2020 and beyond reinforced it. Like, hey, like it or not, online matters because this is the method in which you qualify for Capcom Cup, where money is eventually made, right? So there was a big culture shock in the FGC because of COVID forcing this online era. And so 2020 was definitely the time where there's like the most resistance, and then it started to loosen up in 2021, and then 2022 people were like, all right, this is just how it is. Like, if you're still around, you better participate online.
Yeah, for sure. Like I mean I'm sure you remember a time when like online tournament was like used as a slur, basically, you know, like it carried like a subtext of like, you know, online warrior, online etc. Like winning online was like taken as fraudulent by a lot of people just inherently, especially early on. So like it did take a couple of years before people kind of realized this is what we're stuck with at the moment. You have to just accept it. Were
you part of that group? Not saying you're using online warrior as as derogatory as some people did, but did you also have that impression in 2020? Because you were very active at this time. And was that out of like necessity, or did you see this as an opportunity? Were you disappointed that the offline events were no longer there? Because it seemed like a kind of perfect storm for you. Because I think you weren't sponsored at this time. You had just gone this part-time route. Now you're working remote. Now there's all these online opportunities. It almost seems like a great opportunity for you. So how did you feel about it?
Yeah, like I know it sounds weird to say this, but in some ways, you know, the pandemic worked out quite well for me. I know that's an odd way of phrasing it, but like, yeah, the sequence of events that lined up with, you know, everyone mostly being at home, and more people watching streams, more people participating in online tournaments, more eyes on that environment. Because that was the other thing. It was very hard to get people to watch online tournaments. It wasn't just competing in them. A lot of online tournaments just did not have any numbers until that became the only form of tournaments. So suddenly, like Salt Mine League, for example, as you said, would be getting, you know, 600, 700, 800 viewers, whereas like an online tournament 2 years previous would be struggling to break 50. So I think that was a big part of it. It did in some ways work out well for me.
Did you feel like the results mattered though? Like personally, like when you got a first place in Salt Mine League, like because at this time also Street Fighter V was more critique for its net code, even though I feel like in most situations towards the end they did make some patches to improve it, and also the competitive sphere became aware of ways to treat it using training mode to reduce any kind of inherent lag with the game engine. Everyone's on wired. We switched to PC. I think PS4 is the biggest culprit in this all for the netcode experience, besides the netcode itself being flawed to not handle that use case. So did you feel like you were getting legitimate practice and having legitimate results at that time? Because some players at this era would say this doesn't count. I clearly remember that in the 2020 era.
I think I saw it, I don't know if I considered it legitimate or not legitimate, really. I just kind of saw it as preparation for what was to come next. Because I suppose at that time we didn't know like how long lockdown was going to last, if this was going to be 6 months or 2 years or whatever. So I was kind of the mindset of like, okay, I'm going to enter all these online tournaments. And that means that when things do open up again, I'll be, you know, ready to hit the ground running with the offline events. Because I guess I was kind of like the naive assumption that like COVID would just stop one day and we'd all go back to normal. You know, it would be like pre-COVID CPT would just open up again. And so that's kind of my, yeah. So I don't know what I thought in terms of like if the tournaments were like legitimate or not. Certainly in terms of the skill level they were. Like the Salt Mine Leagues were incredibly difficult. We had like all the top UK and EU players regularly competing. It was like a mini CPT pretty much every weekend. So like competitively, I think it was a really tough environment. But in terms of like the prestige of winning a Salt Mine, I don't know. It felt more like a weekly than winning a major, if that makes sense.
Right. I mean, it objectively was a weekly, but I agree with you with the terms of increased competition. We had NLBC online, and I think objectively the level of play at NLBC was online was greater than NLBC offline, right? You had everyone in NLBC offline plus all of the East Coast. Suddenly the level of play was so much higher. But at the same time, it didn't have quite the same appeal to people as being there in person. So the prestige wasn't as much, the hype wasn't as much, even though the viewership was actually really good. So it was an interesting time where you had a lot more heavy competition, but then the results also mattered less. It was an interesting time back then. But a lot of people, like you mentioned, were grinding for what would come next, which ended up just being more online. And we're still in that era of more online. So I think you did prepare correctly in the end, right? It actually worked out for you. But in this era though, 2020, you're still playing Dhalsim, and I brought up how well you're doing because 2021, in the middle of August, drops this weird old guy Oro, and then things changed, right? And well, I know you also were bombarded with questions about this. So what was that transition or that initial attraction with the old fellow like?
I mean, the thing was, I'd already been losing interest in Dhalsim for quite a long time before that. It wasn't like I just went from Dhalsim to Oro seamlessly. Like, I had been looking for a switch for probably about a year before that, because I played Seth for a little while. I played Gil for a little while. Because that was the other thing, is because the competitions had shut down due to the pandemic, I was just sort of like having fun, just trying out characters and just messing around in ranked with like different picks. But like, yeah, I was just kind of tired of playing Dhalsim. I didn't really stop enjoying him. I just felt like I'd done too much of it. Like, I'd been playing Dhalsim solidly for like 4 or 5 years straight at that point, and I was just looking for something a bit different to close out the game. Because I had the feeling as well that Street Fighter V was like coming towards the end now, and I want to end this doing something a bit fun focused rather than hyper competitive. So like, I started playing Oro on the day he came out, when no one gave a shit about Oro because everyone was playing A.K.I instead, because they came on the same day. I remember actually on the day that they came out, because Oro and A.K.I dropped together, Capcom was trying to recruit people for one of those like showcase streams. Capcom UK, you know, they used to do like get a bunch of players to like do some like lobbies with the new characters to show off their new stuff. And they literally couldn't find any Oro players. There was like 5 A.K.I players. It's probably still up on YouTube somewhere. There was a bunch of A.K.I players, and then just me getting my shit kicked in by lots of A.K.I players with my terrible day 1 Oro. But yeah, no, I just think he was like a super fun character, and he hit that like that fun spot for me of just like a character that I just like booting up the game and playing. Like, at that time, I was playing so much ranked off stream, which I don't usually do. I don't usually play that much off stream, but I just loved booting up the game and just doing silly Tengu stuff with Oro. It was just fun.
Yeah, he was the most fun character I've ever got to play. I think it scratched the same itch for me, right? He dropped. I had no interest in Oro from any previous games or no attachment to the character whatsoever, and I just tried him because he was new. And then I was like, there's a lot you can do with this guy. And it just kept evolving. It felt like every other day there was a new conversion, new tech, new things to do. And it wasn't just Tengu Stones, right? I think that's also the misconception. Tengu Stones is obviously an X factor, and there's so many things you can do with Tengu Stones. And we didn't have enough time to push it to its limits. But even base Oro, he had so many unique properties and juggles and so much tech to explore. And it was just a real testament to the late season Street Fighter V DLC. Like, that last season post Seth wasn't even supposed to happen. It was extended because of COVID happening, which obviously was impacting the world and also the production of Street Fighter VI. So to make up for that, they gave us maybe the best season of Street Fighter V DLC ever, minus Luke, I think. Yeah. But every character that released then was great.
I think it wasn't even just the final season. I just think like every single DLC season got better and better. Like even the one before that was still really good, which was, what was that like? Was that Rose? I've lost track of the seasons.
Rose was Dan and Rose were the first 2 of the last season. Okay. So the last 2 characters in the previous season were like Gil and Seth.
Gil and Seth, yeah. So I think they were already on a really good spot in the previous season. Like it was really nice to see, because a lot of people's criticism of Street Fighter V early on, among other things, was that the characters felt very cut down from previous iterations. Like a lot of people's complaints about your season 1 and 2 of Street Fighter V was that it felt like playing a previous version of the same character, but with a bunch of their fun stuff removed. And it took quite a few years for Capcom to start getting a bit more confident and a bit more experimental with the kits. But they did a great job towards the end. You know, Gil was amazing, fun to play. Not very strong competitively, but like, I mean, just cutting ahead real quick, like Gil's design is a lot of why I like playing A.K.I now, because A.K.I.'s poison system is basically just Gil's retribution system. So like, yeah, the final season of DLC characters and the one before that were like I just thought they were like the best Capcom had done in a very long time.
Yeah, they were really good. I enjoyed playing Seth a ton. I mean, Seth was busted upon release, but
True.
even when they toned Seth down to make Axe Kick not completely broken, you could see the depth was there. Just that system of absorbing everyone else's moves and then having unique combo extensions from everything. Like that was such like a work of passion. Like you could feel the passion from the devs towards the end,
Yeah.
where a lot of characters before then definitely felt very cut and dry. And then Dan, extremely unique with his V skill cancels, and he was a real character, real combos. Rose, really interesting kit as well. I played a lot of Rose. And then, of course, Oro. I think Akira, I'm kind of an Akira hater. I kind of hate that character. But I can at least acknowledge her unique attributes.
Yeah.
And then Luke was overtuned probably to sell Street Fighter 6. So that was the biggest blight at the end.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the rest of the season was amazing. And then Oro, I mean, yeah, you instantly gravitated towards him. And then this pairs with you starting the Clips channel. And it's great because Oro is the most clippable character in the game. It is so easy to get sick Oro clips every session. And I agree with you. Every time you boot up to play that character, there's something new to find. So I feel like you had this really good pairing now. So on top of all this, now you've found your character that works with your content. And did you also feel like there was another boost then? So this is 2021 is now when your YouTube era begins. You're merging with Oro, and even your results in the big CPT events, they start to climb as well. Did you feel like a synergy happening at this time? Because people didn't expect Oro to be successful in the beginning either.
Yeah, like, I think it was because I had sort of stopped caring about competition at that time. Because like I said, I was kind of like, I felt like Street Fighter 5 was on its way out. So like I said, I was focused on having fun. And maybe I think what happened is that like that focus where I was like just playing the game because I was enjoying it a lot more rather than just grinding it out competitively, that might have actually helped me perform better, because I was going into it like I'm gonna ruin someone's day to day with Oro. Like that was a really like powerful thought. And like especially going ahead into like Street Fighter League and stuff, every single person I spoke to there was like, I don't want to play against you. I don't want to play against Oro because you look like you're having too much fun when you play that character. Like everyone was stressing so much and I'm just out there having a blast. Like it was the first time that I really felt like that synergy of like, I like playing this character competitively and I also just have a lot of fun playing him. And that was like ideal for, as you say, like the YouTube situation as well, because yeah, Oro is extremely good for content. Like I do think there is a big aspect of content creation which maybe isn't discussed, which is that like character choice actually does matter. I don't know if you felt that way too. Well, like there are certain characters who are just too dry to make interesting content out of. Like I couldn't be like a Kami player. I'm trying to think of like what who do I pick here that's going to insult the least people? But I couldn't be like a Kami player and be like, oh man, check this hype new combo I just discovered. Like I just couldn't do it.
Well, if you were going for the content with certain characters, you were objectively sacrificing optimal gameplay, right? Like you should be fishing for a low forward whiff punish into a knockdown into a tick throw.
Yeah.
Like that is what you should be doing as Cammy. And if you did anything interesting, you're probably picking V-Trigger 2 and you're doing some suboptimal gimmicky setup, which is just objectively leading you to win less, right? So Oro was definitely a fusion of like the optimal gameplay was also flashy. And also I like Rose for that. I think Gil was like that. There's a handful of characters in the late season where it's like their optimal style is also the most stylish. And I definitely agree with that. I mean, I used to play Balrog, right? I think Balrog was not the driest, but he was a drier character. And I noticed an uptick in my content reception when switching to Oro as well. Even though I'd already established a following with Balrog, it was just so much easier to farm clips with Oro every single day. And just videos, like every single day, I'm going to try a new technique. I'm going to try this or that. Yeah. So that really helped out.
Yeah, like as you say, like a big part of Oro, as well as like just being fun to play, is that because he had so much depth to him, that lends himself to so many different types of content. Because you can be like, today I'm going to learn how to do the jump cancel stand medium kick loop, or today I'm going to learn a new V trigger combo. Like there was just so many different ways you could take it, where rather than just like here's some footage of me playing matches. There was the more, I think like the more depth the character has, the more that lends itself to different types of content.
Right. And I think that's something that you realize too, and this is something that I had to work on myself when starting the YouTube journey, is that you have to have a story to whatever you're putting out on YouTube. There has to be a point to it. And I think where a lot of the initial content creation from more competitive fighting game players falls flat is it's like, here's me playing the game. Here's me playing ranked matches for no reason. Like there's no stakes, there's no build up, there's no storyline. And then that just has no appeal. Even if you're amazing, like occasionally that can carry. If you're like Daigo in his prime, people might want to tune in to see the legendary Daigo play.
Yeah,
but if you're not Daigo, how do you build that?
Yeah, like when it comes to that stuff, I feel like the only way you can make content like that is like, as you say, either you are a god at the game or you have a force of personality, like a smug, for example. So like if you aren't like, if you haven't maxed out your charisma stat or you haven't maxed out your Street Fighter skill stat, just playing ranked is not going to cut it for a video.
Right. And I think it's good to assume that you have not maxed out your charisma stat. Like I think you should start from that assumption that you are not as entertaining as you might think you are.
Yeah.
And I think some people don't realize that.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, and there's objective ways to then improve your video which don't rely on a personality. And I think that's also reassuring to people who might realize they're not that entertaining. Like they don't want to force a personality when they're more laid back, reserved, whatever. You can find other ways to make engaging content, which is just structuring things to have a plot line or to have a goal. Like I'm going to achieve X, Y, or Z. Here's the journey. Here's why it matters. Here's what happens if I fail. And there's a payoff at the end.
Yeah.
That's simple. You can do that in so many different ways. Or just, do educational stuff or something. So even if you play a dry character, even if you aren't the most charismatic person, there's still ways to go about creating engaging things. And I think you've found that rhythm. And I'm not saying you're not charismatic or anything, but what I'm saying is you found a balance between skill, because you're extremely exceptionally talented and you grind and you have a lot of technical knowledge of the game. And then you also provide edutainment, a lot of educational stuff, value to viewers that they wouldn't be able to find elsewhere. And then on top of that, you also have segments where you go for challenges or you have stakes, and then you have the tournament gameplay on top of that. So I just wanted to commend you for finding the balance. That was just me commending you. So was that a difficult journey to go down to start realizing that, though? Because you were doing the clips. When did you start actually saying, okay, I got to do longer form content? And what was that transition like?
So like probably about, I want to say about a year after I started doing clips. As I said earlier, clips kind of stagnate at a certain point. There is a pretty big upper limit for how much a clips channel can grow. So I'd noticed that the channel was starting to stagnate a little bit. And the other thing was that I'd started to do a few longer form videos just because it had breached the time limit of the clips. So for example, like I think one video I went on a rant about why Luke was hilariously too strong in the final season, or like before the last balance patch. I just did like a 4 or 5 minute rant about like Luke's tools and why I think they're too strong. And it ended up being a bit longer than my average video. And I did a few of those, and I noticed that like that kind of content I actually liked making. Like I like doing a bit more of a longer breakdown of like talking about a new bit of tech or talking about a character, just sort of like all the thoughts that every Street Fighter player has in their head, just like trying to get them out and just express them a little bit. I kind of got into that vibe, and I was just like, okay, maybe I can kind of transition my channel away from clips and into like a proper full length channel. And I think I even asked you, I think I DM'd you around that time saying like, do you have any advice for that situation? Because I was tempted at the time to make a brand new channel for full-length videos, but I think you wisely steered me away from that. It was like, it made a lot more sense to just change the existing clips channel into rebrand it as just the channel, and then it just kept going from there.
Yeah, I think I vaguely remember this conversation, but I think you DM'd me about this, and this might have been the time where I tried to like search for your channel and I couldn't find it, and I was finding like some like 10-year-old's Minecraft channel. I was like, just searching Broski. I was like, I am not. This is not your channel. This is some Minecraft parkour thing.
It's a big like hurdle to overcome in the FGC. The amount of people who start YouTube channels and then I search their names in the search bar and I just can't find it at all is it's crazy. Like it's hard to get yourself to the top of the results. So I have a lot of sympathy for people who are just getting started with that, because it's tough.
Yeah, it's very tough, but I think the thing that you overcame was just doing it, right? I think that's the number one hurdle people face, is that they try to create this concept of like the perfect approach to whatever might be. In this case, it's doing content creation, and they plan it in their head and they refine it, they refine it, they refine it. It's all in here, and there's nothing created into the world. And at the end of a year of planning what you're going to do, you've actually done nothing a year later, but you burned a bunch of calories getting the brain juices going, but you've actually achieved nothing. No work has been done. Whereas you have found, like, you just did it and you refined it, and you got to do something bad at first, and then eventually you figure out how to do it better and better and better and better, and you got to just do it.
Most of my old videos are like unwatchable to me. Like I can't stand any of my earlier videos. Like, and I'm sure I'll feel that way about my current videos a few years from now if I'm still doing this. But like, you just got to keep uploading. Like, that's the single most important thing I think for YouTube, is you just got to keep doing it. That's the core of it. And obviously there's more to it than that, but a lot of people I've noticed, like, will start YouTube channels in the FGC and then upload 5 videos. They don't suddenly go mega viral and they just give up. And it's just like, that's not how this website works. Like, you've got to just keep doing it.
Well, that's not how any skill works either, right?
Yeah.
I think the other thing is you have to appreciate content creation as a skill as well. Obviously, there's a massive amount of luck involved, especially for breaching like mega content creator, like full-time living, making a lot of money status, right? Like that, there is definitely luck involved. And there's some people who don't do any work and end up getting that luck, right? Ignore the outliers, right? Because I think that demotivates people.
Yeah.
But if you look at it as a skill, just like with competing itself in Street Fighter, it's something that you have to do. Like, I can't just sit here and think about Street Fighter and never actually play the game. Like, I maybe have some good ideas, but until I put into practice and refine it and actually implement it, it doesn't matter. It doesn't actually improve my gameplay. You have to produce gameplay to improve it. Same thing with content creation. You have to produce content to improve it. But on the other hand, there's also people who upload the same thing for 10 years straight and never refine. So
yeah,
you got to do it, feedback, pay attention to it, refine it, and keep going. And you definitely, you definitely did that yourself, because now your YouTube channel is one of the most successful YouTube channels in the FGC period right now. Like, you're doing really well right now. I wonder how you think about that. Do you think it's just your content creation skills itself have improved, or just your clout in the FGC, everything kind of blending together is on the up right now? The Broski brand is hot right now. Like, what do you think that reason is?
It's probably a few of the things that you just mentioned, I think. So, like, I do think my videos are getting better because my editing, because I edit my own videos. So, like, I hated editing. When I first started doing YouTube, the number one thing I despised doing was video editing. I was bad at it. I was slow. It would take me, 3 times the length of the video. Just like, it would, like, when I first started, it would take me like 3 hours to edit a 20-minute video. I was just so inefficient and so unused to doing all this. But now that I've been doing it for a while, I can cut that significantly down. I don't really mind editing anymore. Like, I'm fairly happy to keep editing my own videos for the time being. So, like, I think that's helped. I've got a better understanding of, like, how to construct a video that has, like, as you say, like a defined beginning, middle, and end, like that basic story structure that you need. And I've picked up like some other skills along the way. Like, I actually plan my content segments now, which I know it doesn't sound like a very big deal, but like, you'd be surprised how many people just wing everything on the fly, and it doesn't make for a very nice flow. So now, like, 24 hours before my stream in the evenings or whatever, while I'm eating dinner, I'll just get out a notepad and write down, like, here's what I'm going to say roughly on the intro. Then I'm going to go to this point, this point, this point. Then I'm going to do the outro. And then not only does that make the video a lot more watchable, I think, but also it makes it so much easier to edit. Like, it's like a measure once. Wait, what's the phrase? Measure twice,
cut once.
Yeah,
yes.
It's that kind of situation. Measure twice, cut once. So, like, the more you put into planning a video before you do it, before you even record anything, the easier it is to edit afterwards, and that saves you so much time. So, like, I just think, like, my production process has got a lot more efficient. But as you say, like, also, like, growing on Twitter has helped a lot, I think. Growing on Twitch has helped a lot, I think. So, like, it's kind of a mix of a bunch of things.
Yeah, I think the planning your content is huge, because the pipeline also that you've been following is the same that I had started out with, and that is the most efficient way, I think, for a competitive player to also produce content, right? Because you're a streamer, and then you use your stream as the platform to produce the content on, and then you refine it, edit it, package it for YouTube, right? And that also allows you to, one, stream, build your Twitch audience, give your subscribers and viewers a dedicated place to hang out and interact with you. Two, you can segue into playing and actually practicing, and sometimes the content is yourself practicing, and then it's just very time efficient that way. You're doubling down on your time. You're kind of there's no waste, right? Your YouTube content is your stream content. There's synergy there, and then the planning ahead. Yeah, I 100% agree. I mean, when I do a lot of these videos, I have pages and notes, and it helps when also you're not feeling the most eloquent, because I think you're very well spoken. I think you're very measured in the way you speak. For myself, that's a skill I had to really work on, and I can tell there's days where the brain juices just aren't flowing, and I just can't get a sentence out, and I'm like, man, thank God I'm not editing this, because I started working with AA, my editor, and I just know he's gonna have to work so much harder to cut this out, work through that. But if it's a topic I'm not as well versed in, you need that outline, or else you're wasting time. The edits become so painful. So that's a huge bit of wisdom for sure that you shared there for anyone trying to do this. Just plan ahead, because editing sucks. It does. Yeah. But it's something you should do. It's something you should do up front.
I think because no one's going to get into content creation from day one hiring an editor, generally. Like, you should do it yourself for a little while to understand the process of putting together a video, and then maybe once you've done it a bit yourself, then you can, I think, look at, getting someone else to edit for you. But I think it definitely helps a lot to get that perspective, like the editor's point of view, so that then you don't, if, for example, if I'm saying a line and I realize I misspoke, I will then take 5 seconds, go back and say it again, even though the Twitch audience might be confused why I'm repeating myself. Future me, when I go and edit it, the next day or 2 days later or whatever, is going to be so thankful that I went and did that. It helps a lot.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot of things that you start to recognize for sure. Also, reasonable expectations, right? Like, I think if you do your own editing, you realize how much work it is. And then even if someone works quickly, you realize, oh, you're paying for their expertise to get something done quickly, not for their time. They put the time, thousands of hours in beforehand to develop the skill. And you won't be like, oh, come up with a whole 3D model graphic intro and have me flying around. You understand the level of work that goes into accomplishing anything. And you find your own creative voice, I think. I enjoyed doing my own editing for a while when I did it, but it definitely hit a point where I was like, okay, I can't keep up with my work schedule, stream schedule, and get enough content out with the style I'm doing. It was impossible. So at that point, you have a style and you know what you like. Then you can look for someone in this very small bubble who can match that. So I don't know if you're ever planning on going down that route to scale up, or if you feel like your balance right now is fine.
I mean, for the time being, my balance is okay, but I may need to do going forward. It's reached the point now where I've become sort of possessive over my own videos. I don't know if you've ever experienced this, where it's like,
absolutely,
I worry that if I hired an editor, they wouldn't edit it the right way, the way that I want it to come out. And so now I'm in that spot where I'm like, if I did hire an editor, I'd be concerned that I'd like micromanage almost, like, oh, I wouldn't have done that like that, or stuff like that. But yeah, it's just a case of, I think you just got to find an editor that like matches your style. Because like, for example, AA, who edits for your channel, was a huge inspiration for me when I edit my channel. Like I actually had a big document that I wrote somewhere on my computer, which was like, I would make notes while watching one of your videos of like how AA is like cutting together the clips in a way that makes them flow, because it's actually very difficult to do that. Like, I don't know, like I said, until you've done video editing, you can't really understand this, but like just putting together like a match cut down, so like turning like a full-length match into like a series of like 5 or 6 key moments in a game like Street Fighter, where there's so many different things happening, and without making that like too hard for the viewers to follow, is extremely difficult. Like if you just get like 5 random clips from a round and then just put them together, the video is unwatchable. So like I actually used to like make lots of notes of like how your editor would structure each clip in a way that actually made them flow from one to the next, and it's really hard to get good.
Yeah, I think that's AA's absolute specialty, and I'm sure he's also nodding his head about the micromanaging thing, because absolutely, I'm a micromanager at heart. So I've had to learn over, like, I would say the first year it was really bad, but that was also the year where we're both really feeling out what things are going to be. Like, he's understanding my style, and I'm understanding what he is like. What am I actually communicating to him? Like, what do my words mean when Double A reads it, and like what idea is that putting to someone's head? Because the ability to communicate a vision of something with words is extremely difficult. And I was like, oh man, writers are good at what they do, right? You read a book and then there's an image in your mind of what's happening. How can I tell Double A about some random thumbnail idea I have, or some random vision for the edit, and how it's supposed to flow in words and then make it happen for him? So we really worked on that for the first year or so. And eventually, it might have been like a year and a half too, where I was like, okay, I'm going to start letting you come up, do almost everything. Like me, almost hands off. Now, occasionally I still get in there, or if I have feedback about something, I'll provide it. But I started to try to put a bit more work up front, just like with my own content creation. I would provide an outline of like, hey, here's what the video is. Here's a handful of thumb title ideas I have. I might even sketch up some documents or whatever, some rough images. Here's what the key components I want to focus on. Here's something I don't want included for X, Y, or Z. Here's the feeling it should evoke. I might provide some of that, and then just be like, okay, whatever you put out, it's there. You know, occasionally, you know, it comes back. Occasionally, I'm like, no, we're this thumbnail on this random video on a Tuesday, we're gonna redo 30 times until it's just right. And occasionally that really pays off. Like I think occasionally we've been able to turn videos that might just be 10 out of 10 to 1 out of 10. We did that recently on a tech video I did about DI and Drive Rush, like one of my most recent videos. The thumbnail carries. The video itself, whatever, honestly. Yeah. The thumbnail, because I was like, now let me hop in here. I see what you're doing. I think we should go this way. I think we found magic there. So finding that balance will take time, for sure. But I think it's worth it, because I don't know if you have this intention or not. Do you ever plan on doing more higher production stuff versus sort of the talking head on stream style videos? Is that something you're interested in?
To be honest, I haven't really thought about it that much. Like, I do like watching some of the more higher budget stuff. Like, is it Kore Gaming that did the documentary of like the Pakistani Tekken scene? I think
yes.
that video, like, I was amazed by that video. Just the production quality, like, and the overall level of sheen compared to me sitting on stream talking about, you know, the latest glitch or whatever. It feels like worlds apart. But I haven't really thought about moving into that area. I'm still kind of trying to refine where I'm at right now, rather than like scaling it up to like an even bigger production.
Right. Yeah, that's something that I was wondering about, because I definitely feel like I'm in my era where I want to do more off stream than on stream. And I'm going through that growing pain, those growing pains now. Like even this is a off stream sort of production. Like, how do we manage this? How do we make this look clean? I'm doing other things that are scripted. Ooh, that's that's tough. Have you tried reading a scripted line for a camera before?
Oh my goodness! I mean, the only scripted video that I've done in the last like year was the A.K.I guide, because for an actual like full on character guide, I wanted to be like really clear that like every line wasn't wasted, because lots of my videos have me jumping around between points. There's a little bit of like off the cuff, sort of like a conversational feel to it, but like I wanted to make sure the A.K.I guide was like information dense, no waffling, no filler. So I actually scripted that one, and if you go and watch that, I sound like a different person. I sound like a zombie in that one. Like, my voice isn't exactly known for being especially emphatic, even at the best of times. But in that video, it's like, man, I can't watch the A.K.I guide myself, because I'm like, who is this robot talking to the camera right now?
But there's something to be said for that, because like you mentioned, there's like no fat on it, straight to the information. That's something that I've been really enamored with, that idea of just providing pure value. The conversational tone, there is definitely something to that. People love that, and I feel like that's more like an influencer route, right? Like, people like a bit of your personality in the way you deliver things. But I guess as the years gone on, I thought more and more about like, how can I just deliver information or content that people find value in, with it being less about like if you like me as a person or not. Because I don't even like me as a person sometimes. It's like, let's get this out of the way. Like, what can I do objectively to help the viewer in this? So I've been investigating more of that. So I think the balance you have now though is great, because people love the way you're able to explain things. I think you have a very natural talent for breaking down concepts and ideas in the game and making it very digestible and understandable. So
Thank
if you ever decide to go down the other path, we can talk about that process. But I think you're doing great now.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. Okay, content aside, though, there was still a lot going on 2022 actually competitively, because there was that synergy with your content, Oro gameplay, all that, and that actually built up to Street Fighter League, right? So you mentioned it briefly. You're on Street Fighter League EU, and you're playing Oro this time all the way, and people don't want to play you, and for good reason, because you actually had a really good record that season. You were on the winning team, Mouse, like you actually ended up going to the Street Fighter League Worlds, but it wasn't a situation where you're sitting out, on the sidelines watching Problem X and everyone else carry you. You actually did a lot of work. So what was that experience like? Because this is the time, I think, when they're doing this pre-recorded, all like in a marathon sprints, aired out over a year.
Yeah,
it was
it was a learning experience for sure, because like I'd never done anything like that. So Street Fighter League EU, up until the most recent one, we all just flew out to France and filmed the whole thing, like over the course of about a little bit less than 2 weeks. And being like, I think in the FGC we get used to meeting people for a weekend and then seeing them 6 months later. Like that's the FGC cycle. Like we'll spend a weekend together and then we'll meet up further down the line. But like being in a team tournament where I'm surrounded by my team, we're eating together, we're training together, we're strategizing together like every day for like 10 days straight, it was a huge learning experience for me. And I had a lot of fun though. It was a great time. And yeah, we were able to win, and that was good. I was happy about that. Yeah. Yeah.
Was there any individual win for you that tournament that really stood out to you? I was trying to go back through some of the results, and I think in the last set you were winning against TKR, if I remember correctly. But was there any specific win for you personally that you're like, hell yeah? Or did anything stick with Oro? Does anything stand out in your mind?
I don't remember doing anything like super sick with Oro. Like I don't remember any super like standout highlights, but I do remember I played against A.K.I, one of the Europe's best Guile players, in one of the matches. And I remember I managed to do this setup where I had Tengu active. I did like a jump normal, and then he did a V reversal, and the stones like bopped him in the face, like during the V reversal recovery. And that's kind of been like, I don't know, that just sort of stuck in my memory as like, oh, that was kind of cool, like a little mini highlight. But I don't remember doing any, there wasn't really like big standout moments. I just remember my big takeaway was everyone coming up to me and being like, please don't play against me. Like every other team was just like, I'll play anyone else, but I don't want to play Oro. especially because in Street Fighter League, there's first to 2 and first to 3, and you pick who's going up for which game. And Oro is an unstable character, I would say, relative to like stable characters like Luke or something. And that was another thing. Like first to 2 Oro, people just did not know what to do. Like I was just having a great time rushing people down and just activating V trigger and going ham. It was fun.
That's true. No one had enough experience. I mean, there were certain matchups that I felt like really shut Oro down. And you couldn't access the fun part of his gameplay. Especially characters with really strong anti-fireball tools would kind of just like nullify his whole structure of his non-Tengu Stones game plan. But if he got to engage it all and you got V-Trigger activated, if they're not intimately aware of what's going on and the risk reward of what's going on, they might not respect the stones, right? That's the old
you should turn that into a catchphrase. You should put that on a t-shirt.
Maybe I should. Good idea. Maybe a few years late. But yeah, you did really well that tournament, and I can definitely see everyone not wanting to fight you. You guys win. You qualify for Street Fighter League Worlds. So is this the second time then you're back in America? Is that accurate? 2018 Evo, and then Capcom Cup 9. You're back for Street Fighter League.
Yes, that was my second time in America. Yeah.
So you're there out for Street Fighter League Worlds because they combine that with Capcom Cup. But you're also there early, so you get to participate in the LCQ and get to hang out with everyone for another 10-day stint, or maybe even longer. That format was ridiculous. It was like 14 days almost.
Went on forever, yeah.
I thought you were going to mention when you said it was great, a learning experience to spend 10 days with your teammates. I thought you were going to say like, oh, I was sick of them by the end because that Capcom Cup, 3 days in, hey, how's it going, everybody? What's up? But day 9, I was like, hey, I don't want to see your face anymore. Like, I want to get out of here. Like, nice playing some games with you. I'm going home, please. But yeah, so you there and you were in the LCQ and you had a really good run there. Do you remember any highlights from that run specifically at the LCQ?
So the funny sort of story from that LCQ, to qualify for top 8, I had to beat a unknown Japanese birdie/poison player by the name of Hikaru, which has come full circle now because Hikaru is now one of the best, if not the best Aki player on the planet. So like that's been an interesting little development. But yeah, no, I played well in that LCQ. I lost to a Bison player by the name of Fake Problem X, I remember in that tournament, who we now all know as Zhen, but he entered the tournament as Fake Problem X and beat the real Problem X in that bracket, which is quite funny. And yeah, I got top 8, and I think I lost to Joey in top 8. But yeah, no, that was a fun tournament. I remember enjoying that one a lot.
Right. You also beat Nemo along the way too, right? I think that was actually who you beat to qualify. Yeah, and you had some big wins. Yeah, you're one of the many victims of Jen that run, right? He beat you. I think you were one of the closest to beating him actually. You got at least got a game on him. Many people went down 0-2, 0-3. You know, he was unstoppable even throughout Capcom Cup all the way to Mena. Mena was the only person who could actually put a stop to him. So, you know, you almost changed history right there.
The timeline very nearly got altered there.
You just needed slightly different RNG maybe on the Tengu stones. Who knows? Got a couple dinosaurs in there. It could have been all different. But yeah, you had a really great run. And that was awesome to see that you cracked top 8 in the LCQ. More Oro representation. The actual Street Fighter League finals, though, I think you had at least one win on, maybe it was Dogura or something. I forget exactly who, but how was that experience? Because it was, you know, tough competition in Street Fighter League finals itself.
Yeah, I think I did beat Dogura, and then I think I might have lost to him in the run back because they did like a format where they rotated who was home and who was away. So I think we might have played twice. But I don't think I did particularly well, but I don't think I did particularly badly either. I just kind of went, I think 1-1 or 1-2. Because in the Street Fighter League World Finals, it's much smaller. Like the main Street Fighter League EU, it's like 6 or 8 teams, I forget, and you know, everyone plays everyone twice. There's 2 weeks of games. There's a lot to adapt to and adjust to. But Street Fighter League World Finals is like 2 or 3 games and that's it. Like you either win or you don't. So it was a lot more volatile, that format, and yeah, I mean that Japan was just unstoppable at that time. And I think that was another thing, is that like because this was it was post-pandemic, like we hadn't had any kind of like communities crossing over for quite some time, so we had no idea what the level of play was in Japan at that time relative to Europe, because every region was just so fenced off from each other. So yeah, it was an interesting learning experience to sort of see where NA was at, where EU was at, and where Japan was at the time.
Yeah, it was the first era where we weren't like cross-pollinating with our players the entire season, right? Because, you know, 2019 and before, it was the offline CBT. You would see these players all the time, so you had a really good sense of where everyone stood. And then the next 3 years, it's everyone in their own pocket, and it's hard to tell how much they're developing. And Japan was just getting better and better. Like, they were getting really good. And then, yeah, Good 8 squad who won was Gachikun, Kawano, Pugera, Dogura. And then, you know, Kawano was on a tear. Gachikun was cooking everybody, Pukera. Yeah. The whole squad is just ridiculous.
I will say, in my defense, just to cope real quick, SFL EU and I think possibly NA at that time in the early seasons, like the teams were specifically constructed to try and like balance them out. So like they wouldn't let the 4 strongest players in one region be on a team together. They would instruct players to like form teams where they felt that they were more balanced, so there was more of a less likelihood of like one team to go crazy and just dominate and body everyone.
Right.
But that wasn't present in Japan. So like Japan's teams were like absolutely broken at that time. But like over in EU, there was much more of an effort to try and like, you know, make them a bit more even.
Do you know that objectively that wasn't a requirement in Japan, or is it just that Japan has that many top caliber players that it's not a factor? Because I don't know the specific rules. Because that is what you're saying for sure. I can confirm that for USA. You know, you're meant to balance in the league like with any other sports league. With the draft, there's systems and checks and balances in place to prevent them from being broken. But when you apply that to NA or EU, you get vastly different results than when you apply that to Japan, because Japan just has that many top level players where it's like, okay, even if you do that, you're still having razor thin margins between the teams, and the best team who wins from that can still beat anyone in the world.
Yeah.
So
I mean, I can't remember the exact details, but like you're probably right that, you know, there's so many broken players in Japan that you don't need to balance the teams because they're all going to be overpowered anyway. So that's probably true.
Right. Yeah, I think the format though of doing these leagues with that sort of balancing in mind for each region and then putting them against each other is absolutely setting everyone else up for failure. Because Japan is just going to be better. There's just simply not enough. The talent pool isn't the top level of play just isn't there in the other regions, right? The depth of talent in Japan is just so ridiculous that players 1 through 30, there's just a razor thin margin between them. But in NA or EU, 1 through 30 is like a world of difference. It's just how it is. Yeah. Even though the top 1 through 3 in each region could beat each other or be better, right? In NA, EU, or Japan, it just doesn't extend that far down the list elsewhere. So I always felt like they're setting up EU and America for failure in this format.
I mean, but they've, to be fair to Capcom's credit, I think they've eased up on that in more recent ones. Even if it has created the situation that we've seen in like SFL EU recently, where the Ninjas in Pajamas team was pretty overpowered relative to the rest of them, if we're being completely honest. But at the very least, that does mean that they now have an extremely good chance to win the World Finals. Like, I would definitely bet on that team with Angry Bird, you know, Phenom, Veggie, and Big Bird to win the whole thing. So it's kind of like,
right,
do you prioritize putting up the team that's going to do the best at the World Finals at the expense of maybe a less competitive base season in Europe? Or do you prioritize making the SFL EU balanced, but then the World Finals might be like less balanced? So yeah, I can see it from both directions. You could make either work.
I think they're just contradictory formats. Like I don't think this idea of combining the regions at the end makes any sense. It's kind of like a show match. Even though I think the most money is awarded for that finals, I think the actual structure is just, it's Looney Tunes. I don't think it makes any sense at all.
When I was out there, it felt more like I was playing in an exhibition match than like the World Finals of some kind of like hyper competitive event. It felt a lot more like I was at an invitational where, you know, they were just trying to show off some inter-region matchups. It had that vibe.
Right. Yeah. Unless they really let the teams go loose, because I don't think the teams in NA are still balanced in that capacity, right? Like pick a best player and then try to balance it. That absolutely is still the case, right? Otherwise, we would have Mena, Punk, maybe like a Knuckle Do, or I don't know. You would just put all of East Coast, throw Idom in there, put all of East Coast onto one team, and then that would be the team, right? It's not how it is. They spread it out. So we'll see how that actually ends up. But it's actually, now that you mention it, you actually turned down the opportunity to participate in Street Fighter League EU this year. And I know we briefly talked about that. Did you share publicly what those reasons are, or is that something keeping closer to the chest?
Well, I'll the way that I said it and the way that I've been telling people is basically just that, like, I feel like Street Fighter League being like 1 or 2 weeks with all the players together creates this situation where like players will get sponsored, quote unquote, for like a week. And then at the end of that week, it's kind of like, well, you've served your purpose, you hit the bricks kind of situation. And I just didn't really want to do that this year. I was kind of like trying to aim for like more of like a long-term, maybe something stable. I know that doesn't, the idea of stability in the esports is maybe a little bit optimistic, but I'm just trying to like look for opportunities that focus on like stable long-term commitments rather than this constant cycle of like, you're sponsored, you're unsponsored, you're sponsored, you're unsponsored, just like boom and bust over and over again. So that was kind of why I didn't end up signing on for Street Fighter League this year. But yeah, I mean, it's just the way that things go. Maybe next year, who knows? But yeah, it is what it is.
In my personal experience with Street Fighter League, it was also a situation where I felt like the players weren't really appreciated, because season 1 of Street Fighter League, there was 0 appearance fees entirely, until people complained about, hey, we took off 10 days from our real life jobs. We are not full-time professional pros. We are losing money and sacrificing career opportunities in the way we pay rent and our families to be here, and 0 money was guaranteed. Until that happened, they started throwing some pocket cash around.
That is true. I think one of the underrated things about like the difficulty of Street Fighter League is that like if when I was in my early 20s, I was a lot less sort of like ingrained, and it was much easier for me to just be like, oh, I'm gonna go do something crazy for 2 weeks or whatever. But now I've got a job to manage, I've got pets to manage, I've got rent to pay, I got bills to pay. You know, I'm a lot more entrenched now, and that means that getting, I think it's 16 days off work effectively, not earning like I'm not earning any money from my job, I'm not earning any money from Twitch, I'm not earning anything from YouTube. Like, substituting that for like 16 days of like competition is difficult. It's a big ask, and that's another part of why I probably didn't end up going for it this year.
Right. No, you're absolutely losing income. Right. And yeah, hopefully this matures. I mean, like, I think we're in a difficult position where there's not enough full-time pros, and therefore there's not enough people who can make that commitment for this time. Right. Like you mentioned. And I respect the efforts of Street Fighter League, and I do appreciate that the EU one was live as well. I think that adds a much more interesting dynamic.
Oh yeah, it was much better to watch this year. A million times better to watch with it being live.
Right,
yeah.
like right now, Street Fighter League US, there's still episodes to air, and we just had a massive balance patch.
Oh, I'm
so you're
fully checked out of Street Fighter League US. I'm going to be completely honest with you. I have no idea what's happening over there. I'm not that interested.
No, me too as well. And I used to be I made an effort to watch it, right? Like, maybe my interest was waning. I used to make an effort to keep up with it, to stay in tune with the scene. I just felt, like I like to promote the competitive scene, and at least I can try to maybe find something in there that intrigues me. And there still is. Like, I'm interested in Boost from the East Coast, the Ken player. I'm okay. You've heard of him, right? Because he had the top 8 performance at.
Of course, I heard of Boost.
ECT.
Give me some credit. Come on.
Well, I'm also interested in Boost's profile. It's another player I'm like, wow, he should be way more out there right now. So a lot of people might not actually know who Boost is, but he's tearing it up in Street Fighter League US. He's beating everybody, every single player. And so that's great.
I had no idea. That part I didn't know. I had no idea he was tearing up in Street Fighter League US, because I know Boost via his CPT performances, which have been really good, but I had no idea he was doing well in SFL.
I think he only has 1 loss out of like 8 showings already. Like, they're getting near the end. He only has 1 loss, and he's been beating Cien, Mena, whoever, 3-0s. You know what I mean? Like, he's destroying people right now in Street Fighter League. So I wish it was more engaging. If it was live, I'd be tuning in.
Yeah, it's weird, because like, if it was the exact same matches with the exact same results, but it was just live, I definitely would tune in. But something about just knowing that like this all happened 2 or 3 months ago, it was pre-recorded, and now it's just slowly being drip-fed out. And especially, as you say, now that we're on a completely different version of the game, it just really hurts the viewing experience. And it was, funny enough, it was particularly bad during the first SFL of Street Fighter 6, which was SFL EU Season 2 last year. That was recorded only 2 or 3 months after the game came out. So we were all desperately trying to find our feet early on, like, and then they would release the VODs another like 3 months later. And watching the month 3 meta in month 6 looks terrible. Like, the quality of the play in SFL EU last year looked so much worse than it was, because that delay between when it was recorded and when it was broadcast made us all look like scrubs, myself included. I did not do very well. But yeah,
it was a constant stream of comments like, "Wow, Broski went back to JP."
Yeah,
every episode.
The character thing was also a huge issue, because like, especially for my team, so none of us stuck with the characters we were playing in SFL EU that year. So I was playing A.K.I at the time, But if you watched SFL, you would have seen JP. Problem X was playing Blanca at the time, but if you watched SFL, you would have seen Marissa. Ending Walker was playing Ed at the time, but if you watched Street Fighter League, he would have been playing Ryu. Like, Mystic Smash was playing DJ back then. It was so weird watching, like, it's like a time machine. You're watching like 4-month-old footage that's pretending to be live. It was kind of a mess.
And it was just sad seeing the people in the chat like not get it, and have to constantly be corrected. I was like, oh, this is a mess.
It wasn't
so good. I'm hoping they all kind of move to the live situation. But speaking of Street Fighter 6 and your JP era, Street Fighter 6 is coming out. You settle on JP at first, but it sounds like a few months in or a few weeks in, you were already kind of mentioning like, it's not really, might not be for me long term. What was that process like to try to settle on a character, and what were your initial reactions to playing the game?
I think so. The thing with JP was that he was the character I liked most out of the launch roster, but that wasn't the same as him being a character that I actually liked. He was just like the least disliked character, if that makes sense. Like, I felt like he had more sauce than most of the rest of the cast. He had some fun stuff with like his zoning patterns and the spikes in the teleports and some cool stuff with level 2, but I was quickly realizing after about 2 months that I was like, this is going to be like a holdover character until I find someone I like more. That was my thoughts. And then A.K.I came out a few months later, and I just clicked instantly. And it happened at the absolute worst possible time for me as well, because I think A.K.I came out the week before I flew out to Street Fighter League. And that put me in a really awkward position, because I didn't want to let down my teammates with some washed week 1 A.K.I. So I forced myself to play JP, even though I really wasn't vibing with him at all at that time. Like, I had to like force myself to sit down and play JP, and I think it really showed in my gameplay. Like, if you watch SFL last year, I think you can just see I'm just not vibing with JP at all.
Yeah, I did feel there was like a big disconnect between how you were looking in the previous Street Fighter League with Oro and the one with JP, because there was definitely games where I was like, I fully expected you to win that. And especially based on your pre-A.K.I gameplay, when you're on the up with JP, before I think the distaste started to really settle in, or rather the shiny new object was over there distracting you. You could just tell there was flubs, there were some drops, and I'm like, I feel like Broski in his prime would have had that, right? If he was really locked in with that moment. Do you think maybe it would have been better for you then to just fully commit and jump ship, because you would have had the experiences? I'm sure you had time to grind and practice while you're there as well. Or maybe I'm mistaken. I'm not sure how that worked out.
Not really. Like, I just think it was too soon. Like, there was about, I think it was about 1 week before SFL was when A.K.I dropped, and like the day after you fly in, you're playing games straight away. There's not like really much of an easing in period. So like, I just would not have had the chance to really practice her much. But I did do it sometimes. Like, a few times throughout that SFL, I was thinking like, maybe I should just like YOLO it and just try the week 1 A.K.I. But I think I just kept thinking like, this is a team event. I don't want to risk causing problems for my teammates with a risky pick. So I kept playing JP, but maybe it wasn't the right choice. But I just think it was too soon after A.K.I came out to risk it.
Right. That's always a tough decision. When these patches drop, characters release, and then you have tournament schedules. Getting caught between characters like that is very awkward, especially for the first season where we're all finding your footing. I kind of wish it would have been fun to see you just go, screw it, let me go all A.K.I, because I bet you would have got some wins. Like, people would not have known the matchup very well. Yeah, even though A.K.I season 1 was for sure significantly weaker than she is now. Would people have known how to deal with that? Fireball Dry Rush, baby. You might have just shoulda, coulda, woulda. It would have been fun to see. Yeah. It's been better I think it's always a great synergy to see when a player really clicks with their character and actually enjoys playing. And like you mentioned before with Oro, like I felt that myself with Oro. Like, I clicked with the character. I wanted to boot up and play Oro every day. You're now with Aki. I'm still kind of trying to find that again. I have my in between times with my characters these days, but I think that really shows and resonates. I think that's a big part of what people are enjoying about your gameplay now, because Aki drops, and then as soon as you get back from Street Fighter League, you're all Aki all the way. And at this time, I remember when she released, a lot of the sentiment was, what the hell are you supposed to do with this character? Right? Like, I still remember particular tweets from like Chrissy CH and Punk being like, I don't know what you do with this character. And it was Fireball Drive Rush. We all knew that. And beyond that, people thought it was a wash.
Yeah.
So how did you feel about Season 1 Aki? Because you were going all in on this character.
So I figured out, because of that point, it was like about halfway through the first season, and I basically said to myself, I've got two choices here. I either stick it out with JP for the rest of this season while JP is like top 2 or whatever he was back in Season 1, and like try and force my way into Capcom Cup with a character I'm not really enjoying before he inevitably gets nerfed at the end of the season, or I can go with the character that I'm having fun with but is a significantly weaker, and treat it more as a time investment where I'm certain she's going to get buffs. Like, I think there's a tweet I put out like 3 days after Aki dropped where I said, like, I think she's a good investment character for future. And I think I was right. I think I called my shot on that one, She got giga buffed. So, yeah, that was a good read on my part. But yeah, and as you say, like, just having fun with a character, I think, shows in your gameplay. Like, I just have a lot more fun playing Aki, and that that motivates me to want to practice more. A big part of practicing is that you look forward to doing it. So if it's a character I actually like playing, I practice more. It's all it comes down to.
I wonder what you think about that idea of a player being, people call them tier whores, right? This is something that I've always grappled with, because there's been so many times, especially when I was traveling heavy and at like the lowest of my competitive points with Balrog Street Fighter V 2018, right? Season 2, he's busted. Season 3, they nerfed him so that his B&B doesn't even work anymore. And he was made top tier again later on. But I remember being like, wow, if only I could convince myself to switch to a top tier character. And I'm getting on planes and flying around, and that character was just not cutting at the time. I mean, there were still things to do, but he was pretty bad for that first 3.0 patch. And then I see players like, you look at like a Kami. That's someone in the NA scene I really respect. Kami just picks the best fucking character no matter what. Yeah, he constantly switches to them.
Here. Phenom is the eternal top 1 picker.
Even like a Tokido to a degree, even though he doesn't hop around characters that much, but he's part of that mentality of just picking the best character and making it work. And I really respect that, because I don't think people realize from like the more casual perspective how difficult that really is.
I could never do that. I absolutely not. Like, I think there's very few people that can just jump from top 1 to top 1 every season and either make it work and not lose interest in the game. Like, I think it's very specific people that works for. But this idea that like anyone can just jump to top 1 and that's a sensible competitive decision is ridiculous.
Yeah, because people like to romanticize loyalty to a character. Like, that really builds a story that especially more casual audience members love. They love the idea of someone sticking to an unorthodox, underrepresented character, the low tier hero, and then against all odds making it work. And I think you've kind of fallen into, I'm not calling you a low tier warrior, because low tier hero, Laki's not low tier anymore.
Well, this is the thing. Can I just interrupt you there? The best thing you can do in Street Fighter is pick the character that people think is low tier, but is not. So Oro, everyone thought that character sucked. I thought he was like just outside top 10. Loved playing him, but I still got to abuse low tier credentials. People would always be like, damn, he's getting results with Oro, even though Oro sucks. And I'm like, yeah, Oro sucks, sure, why not? And like, I get to absorb the low tier cred without actually playing a low tier. And it's the same with Aki. Like, I still get people being like, damn, he's making Aki work. And it's like, Aki's really good. Like, somehow you have, like, I found these characters where I'm getting low tier cred for playing a character that's really fucking good, but I'll take it.
Right. They just play slightly unorthodox. I mean, I think Oro is really unorthodox. Aki, I don't think is as unorthodox, but she's not playing if you're not a low 4 drive rush character, you're like, what is this character doing in Street Fighter 6? You're so different from the meta, because I think Street Fighter 6 is extremely streamlined on a certain play style. Way more beyond Street Fighter 5, especially later Street Fighter 5. They branched out a lot with the character archetypes and toolkits in later Street Fighter 5. So Aki, even though she's heavily Fireball Drive Rush, she's more of she has her unique toolkit. She has a unique combo structure to her, lots of juggle potentials, and the whole poison system, which makes her a character that is ripe for a character specialist to optimize to the fullest potential. So I think you definitely found your calling with that. But even before she was Giga buffed, which I think she was really strongly buffed in Season 2, you still won a World Warrior in Season 1 with her, right?
Yeah, that was my first tournament with Aki. Like, that was the first time I thought I was at that point where I could take her into a tournament and try her out, and that was one of the World Warriors last year. And I think, so I did win that, but I do attribute quite a lot of that to character unfamiliarity. It was only about like a month after Aki dropped, so I was very happy with the win. It definitely told me that this character has potential, but I wasn't reading too much into it, because I felt like this is more people not knowing how to fight Aki than me proving a point kind of situation.
But that's part of the strategy. You're, like I said, you're picking this, just like with Oro.
Yeah.
Even with Dhalsim to a degree. Even though Dhalsim, it was your responsibility to know that matchup very well in Street Fighter 5. Still, most people didn't, right? Myself included. Yeah. Like, I think you've always, you've often found a lane of this very strong character, slightly unorthodox, has a little bit of an edge with matchup unfamiliarity, but still strong in their own right, even if they know the matchup. And so I think that's still an extremely viable path to take. But even then, you get to the regional finals that year, you end up with a really strong third place finish. At this point, it's the regional finals. There's only 8 people or 7 other players to study for. They're studying for you. They're going to know a lot more thoroughly the matchup at this point. How did you feel about that final run? Because I think you came very close, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, 3-2 in winners finals.
Yeah, that was against Ender. I think that was against Enderwalkers. Yeah. That was again. It was kind of a situation where I was in a similar mindset that I was towards the end of Street Fighter 5, but in like a micro sense, because I didn't feel like the game was coming to an end, but I felt like the season was coming to an end. So like I was already sort of like mentally preparing for like, what am I going to do in Season 2? Is Aki going to get buffed? Like, where am I going from here? So I think because I was kind of just treating it as like the waiting room for Season 2, like my streams at that time were all just called Season 2 waiting room, that I was just, doing my thing. I felt relaxed. I felt fairly confident. Couldn't quite clutch it out at the end. But again, it was a sign for me that I was going in the right direction. Like, I took that result and the World Warrior that I won as like evidence that this could work. Like, if this character continues on the trajectory that I'm going right now, this is eventually going to pay off. I just have to be patient. So that was kind of my thoughts afterwards.
And I think we saw a big part of that with the Red Bull Kumite event. So you didn't make it to the Capcom Cup that season, but you're showing promise. Red Bull Kumite New York happens. You get an invite, and they're doing the drawing for this because it's in the cage. The stage is in the cage. They're surrounded by the crowd. They're trying to make it more exciting. They're drawing the matches 1 by 1 for first to 5 single elim sets. And then, if I remember correctly, you weren't drawn. It was just only you and Mena RD left. Is that correct?
We were the absolute last 2. We were in that waiting room for about 2 hours straight, watching everyone else get picked before us. It was a cruel flashback to my physical education growing up. It was nerve-wracking, like watching the practice, like the player practice room, go from having like 30 people in it down to just me and Mena. I'm just like, that guy's the best Street Fighter player in the world. Like, just me and him. It was surreal.
Right, because not to downplay anyone else in that event, there was a ton of amazing, super strong players there, and you were invited. So even just getting that invitation, how did you feel about that before this whole drawing process was going?
When I got the DM for the invite, I spent the next like 20 minutes like checking, like there's no way this is a real account, right? This has got to be like some prank, or it's someone pretending to be from Red Bull. Like, I'm verifying the name, I'm checking it against the account. Like, is this legit? There's no way they're after me. I was just like in disbelief, because like Red Bull Kumite for me has always been like just this like really esports thing. I don't know if there's a better way of saying that, but it's like a tier 1 production event to watch. It really does feel like you're watching something really well crafted, professional. Everyone involved is like a legend of the game. And so like I was like, they don't want me in this thing, do they? This is for Street Fighter gods, right? This is not for some random A.K.I player. So I did feel a little bit nervous because of that. I felt like I was kind of an imposter going into it. Like I was a little bit worried about that. But I mean, the match with Mena was really good, even though I didn't manage to win it, unfortunately. Everyone seemed to like it.
You might be downplaying a little bit that match with Mena because you two are going at it. I think you win the first of 2 and the first of 3, if I remember correctly. I think you were ahead.
I was ahead 1 or 2 points in the set. I actually lost, I think, the first 2 games. I think I went 0-2 at the start.
Okay, sorry, yes, you're correct.
Yeah. I remember thinking, the one like memory that I have that really sticks out from that match is I remember thinking, not I'm gonna lose this, but like I'm not putting on a good show right now. Like that was the number one thought that was going on through my head. I'm not showing Aki's strengths. This is probably not good to watch. Everyone's just gonna be like watching this like, oh, this is just a wash. So I was like, my number one concern was just not even winning. It was just like, I've got to make this look good, no matter what happens here. Even if I get like 5-0'd, I've got to make this look good. And kind of once that thought was in my head, I kind of switched my perspective a little bit, and I managed to swing it back to, I think at one point I was like 4-3 up or something, but Mena is too damn clutch, and I couldn't quite close it out.
Yeah. So I had it flipped. You're right. Mena won the first of 2-0, and then the first of 3 after you won 2, and then you won 2 to bring it to 4-3, and then Mena closed it out the next 2 games. And that, for context, at that time, Mena RD was everywhere. He won CEO. He got second at Evo. He won Street Fighter League, USA, and Worlds. He's getting top 8 to top 2 at every premier event. He's in top 4 of the Gamers 8. He's just the most consistent player on the planet at this time, right?
Time,
and a game,
Mena was undisputed top 1. I don't think anyone would have argued at the time.
Even with his only top 16 appearance at Capcom Cup, he survived the group of death. And yeah, so he was the guy with the most momentum. And then you show up, you don't even believe it's real getting the invite. You show up, you're sitting there waiting for 2 hours while every other player is being drawn to go play. And there's 5-0s, 1-5, 5-1, 5-0, 4-5 duel Kevin Chris Wong. Shout out to them, put on a good show. 5-2. And then you got to play. So after seeing all these people get washed, I'm sure in your mind, you're like, yeah, like you mentioned, got to put on a good show. And it's an understatement that how hyped that set was. Like, you really brought it together, put on a show. And beyond that, you're the only person to get more than 1 game on Mena that entire event.
Yeah.
Is that strange looking back on?
Yeah. Every other result after that, Mena just won 5-0 or 5-1. So that was kind of reassuring for me. I was like, okay, well, even though I lost the set, that's probably a good sign. Again, like I said, I treat all of these things as like, am I moving in the right direction? Like, is this a sign that I'm still improving? And like, if I can take Mena to last game in a tournament where everyone else is just getting 5-0'd, then I'm probably moving in a good direction. So again, I took that away from it. It was a useful learning experience.
Right. And I mean, it was the most hyped set of the whole tournament. So that was like a big moment, I think, in your career prior to the big moments that would follow for the rest of the season. Because I think that did set the tone for your season ahead. Because come World Warrior, your results are 3rd. I think top 16 for the second one, which might have been your worst performance. But then you win. You're getting 3rd, 5th. You're placing consistently and have some wins under your belts. And then this is in a region with players like Lex, Ending Walker, Problem X, Hurricane, the list keeps going on. One of the most stacked regions in the world. And then finally it comes time to the regional finals. But before that, you end up going to Japan. Can you talk a little bit about your Japan trip and the super premiere there? Because this is like right before you're about to go for potentially your last chance to qualify for Capcom Cup. So what was going on there?
So, to be honest, the Japan trip, even though I was at the CPT Super Premiere, I was mostly just going for a vacation. Like I had such a good time in Japan. I think it was really good for my mental state as well, because I was like kind of burned out a little bit on competing. World Warriors kind of get to you after a while of like playing the same people over and over and over. So I needed a bit of a reset, and that really helped. So like I got back from Japan. Before I get to that, I suppose the actual tournament itself I wasn't too bothered about. I didn't play very well in that tournament, but the tournament, as you know, because you were there, I saw you briefly, wasn't the best tournament of all time, you know, for a bunch of reasons. The non-existent seeding was silly. The stream was, I'm told, unwatchable. It wasn't a great tournament, but like I said, I was mainly just there for a vacation. So I just had a good time, came back relaxed. I met a capybara, not that one back there. And I just felt good when I got back, and I think that like helped me going forward. It's just good to like take a break from it.
Yeah, it was also really interesting. I don't know if you felt that, being able to see how Japanese tournaments work firsthand, because I had heard stories for years about kind of the bureaucracy of it, or just how rules propagate and are treated.
There's a lot of weird things about Japanese tournaments which you don't know until you've done them. Like the process to collect your tickets is one of the most arcane things of all time. You have to like get your tickets from some weird Web 1.0 site, and then you have to then get a code, and then that code has to be put in on Start GG, and then you have to go to 7-Eleven and print out a ticket. It's the whole system there is weird. Like the thing about Japan, my main takeaway from going there was like some aspects of Japan are incredible and futuristic, and it kind of feels like, why isn't everyone doing it like this? But then some aspects are also like weirdly outdated, and there's pointless bureaucracy, and it's that weird mix of old and new that was I thought kind of interesting.
Yeah, it was very interesting. It made me realize, like, wow, they love their rules, right? Like, if there's a rule or a system in place, you follow it to a T, and you know, common sense be damned.
Yeah,
right? There was many times where I was sitting at the tournament station, staring at the monitor. I'm like, "Can we play?" They're like, "No."
Yeah,
and I'm like, "Okay."
Yep,
I'm sitting here for 20 minutes.
Yeah, they called our pools. They told us to sit down. I plugged in my controller, and the guy next to me goes, "No, not yet, not yet." And I'm like, "Oh, is there a problem?" And he goes, "No, we're not playing yet." And I was like, "Okay." And so literally every single pool station, all the players are ready. Everyone's ready to play. Everyone's controllers are plugged in. We've all done our button checks. We could just go, but everyone's just sitting there doing nothing until it hits like precisely 9:17 or whatever in the morning, and then we're cleared to go. And it's just like, is that necessary? I don't know.
Yeah,
there's a lot of sticking to the rules out there.
Yeah, they do that for every round, and I ran into some other issues as well. Yeah, very interesting to see firsthand how they follow it to a T. So it adds the context to all the other stories throughout the years of how Japanese tournaments are very different from those in the West. But it's good to hear that you had a really good time. I mean, Japan was amazing. I had a great time as well. But you come back from that refreshed, ready to go, met your capybara, regional finals. You're in winner side of this regional finals. Was there any sort of pressure, or like, what were your expectations going into this? And did you do any preparation specifically for this event? What was your mindset going in?
So I was going in fairly confident because I was already in the winner's side. Like that was my main focus from the World Warriors, was I needed to finish high enough to get into the winner's side, because fighting that through losers would have been an absolute nightmare. So I was like, I have to get in through winners. So starting in winners already, I think, was a big confidence boost for me. And the other thing I have is that my nerves when it comes to tournament are kind of back to front, where like I'm nervous in pools playing against, you know, a completely unknown player, but in top 8 I'm actually fine. Like once it gets to that part of the tournament, I'm usually fine. And because the regional finals starts in top 8, you skip that whole nervous pools phase entirely, and I actually really feel comfortable in that format. So like I felt good going into it.
Well, it's not also just pools. Do you think also it being first to 3 changes your mental state as well? Like that to me is something that's big. Having a first to 3 set makes me feel much more relaxed than first to 2. I don't know if you feel the same way.
Yeah, no, for sure. We know that Street Fighter 6 is not the most stable game in the universe. So having a buffer where I can, you know, drop a game or even 2 games and it's not the end of the world, definitely makes me feel more relaxed. But the thing is, it's one of those things where, like, knowing that I have those games available, a lot of the time I don't even use them. So, like, you'll notice in Street Fighter 6, a lot of people will say, like, we want first to 3, and then they'll wash someone 3-0, and then people will say, well, that's proof that we don't need first to 3 because you would have won 2-0. Doesn't work like that. That is not how this thing works. The knowledge that you have that space to work with is what helps you play better. So, like, even if you 3-0 someone, that is not evidence that, like, you would have 2-0'd them in a first to 2. So, like, I definitely think first to 3 helps.
Yeah, absolutely. People don't understand how different the meta is. Just like the risk reward objectively changes because the risk in any first to 2 is immediately higher than first to 3. You can afford to make reads. You can afford to play a bit more loose, and being able to play loose will impact your physical state, your nerves, and you'll feel more loose. Like, there's a complete world of difference. So I'm glad you brought up that point of the psychological impact of first to 3 versus first to 2. And let me not go down that path. It's gonna make me. We'll be here for hours if you start going down that path.
I've probably got about 10 minutes left, just to advance warn you.
Got you. Yeah, we're at the end here. Let's wrap it up. Let's get to the conclusion here. So you have the first set under your belt, Hurricane. Ending Walker's your next opponent. This year and also in season 1, it seemed like you were doing pretty well against Ending Walker, or at least competitively. Did you have the advantage head to head at this point up against him, or was he beating you more consistently at this point?
I think.
And what did you feel going into that set?
I think our record recently had been pretty back and forth. I do play quite a lot of lobbies with Enders. And he's one of those players where he's very momentum heavy. So, like, it's one of those ones where, like, you can join a lobby against Enders and he can just run away with it and you'll lose, like, 30 games straight. But then sometimes you can beat him and he'll get out of his rhythm and you'll win, like, you know, a bunch of games in a row. So I had no idea what was going to happen going into it because, like I said, it's just we just go back and forth a lot. And I think it was about 50-50 our recent record. So I was just praying that the odds were on my side on that day.
Well, they were in the winners finals. You had the 3-0 win, which was fairly dominant. And then grand finals, you're sitting there waiting. Ending Walker barely manages to make a comeback versus Hurricane in losers finals. He was down 2-0, wins the 3 straight, has to play you now. And this set, I believe you're one combo away from potentially tying it up, or maybe at least getting the round. He's up 2-1. And then you drop a confirm into level 3, right?
Yeah.
And he ends up closing that out and closing out the set. Coming from that winner's advantage, momentum, 3-0 in your favor, that drop. I saw that drop and I was like, ugh, because that's not a drop for losing that set. That's a drop for your mindset crumbling in that moment, losing your advantage, losing your mental edge, and potentially dropping a tournament that was yours to win. Was there any reaction in that moment, and how did you handle that moment?
I kind of took the opposite message from that, where it was like my mindset was like, that's fine because I don't normally drop this combo, and if I had dropped it, things could be very different right now, and that tells me that I'm not doing too badly in this set. Like, so even though the execution drop happened, the idea being that, like, I'm still playing the right way. If I just lean into this a bit more, I should be fine. So I didn't actually make any real adjustments going from the first to the second set. I was just thinking, like, my game plan here is working reasonably well. There's a few things to tighten up on. Obviously, that drop is unfortunate, but the fact that I could have potentially stolen back a ton of momentum if I just hit that combo is a sign that I'm doing okay. So I actually didn't really feel very shook after that. I was like, I've still got a good chance here. Let's just go again.
Well, it shows because you were definitely cleaning up in that last set, and then in the final round, you're landing huge combo hits. You have Ending Walker in the corner, and we've seen the clip now. I think it's the Bleach theme song. Is that what's playing? You gotta correct me.
Number 1 from Bleach. I know you're an anime expert, so yeah.
I was noticing your anime backlog also in your archive videos. I was like, wow, this anime journey runs deep with Broski. But are you in that moment? Are you hearing the music while you're playing?
Not at all. Okay. Genuinely, I had no idea what music was playing until I watched it back afterwards because I was so focused and, like, so locked in on the gameplay that I couldn't have even told you music was playing. It wasn't until afterwards that someone showed me the clip and was like, "Hey man, check this out. It's a really cool like sync up between you and the music at the same time." I was like, I had no idea that was happening. I was just too locked in.
Because you land a really large combo, push him to the corner, and then you are fishing for the crouching heavy kick confirmed to level 3. You land it right away, get the confirm, and it's single hit confirm, level 3, unscaled. It was still ambiguous to me if that was going to kill in that moment. What were you thinking as the level 3 cinematic was going on?
So I was 99.9% sure it was going to kill, having done that confirm a million times before. But I was desperately telling myself, stay locked in until you see that KO screen. Because if I let the pressure off, like, for even a millisecond here, and this doesn't kill, you know, I'm burned out still. This could be really bad. So, like, even though, from my experience, I pretty much knew it was going to kill, I was, like, forcing myself not to believe that until it actually happened. So I was, like, massive sigh of relief when I saw that KO screen.
Right. I know you wanted to avoid what are you standing up for a moment. I could feel a little bit of that hesitation. I appreciate when a player, even in the face of a guaranteed KO, stays locked in.
Yeah.
Like when they know it's going to KO, maybe the game will glitch out and you'll fall out of the combo for no reason.
Maybe we'll forget how much damage she's supposed to do. I don't know. It's not real until it happens. That was my mindset.
Well, it did happen, and then suddenly it was real. And this is a hobby you've been partaking in for a decade plus at this point, from not even knowing that there was tournaments going on, learning about the scene, how it's worldwide, traveling overseas, meeting all these players from around the world, and then finally the KO appears, and it's real. You're in Capcom Cup. It's not a dream. It's not something that you're getting close to. You're beating some of the best players on the planet, and you've qualified. So what is that moment like for you?
It was weird. It's hard to explain. Like the way that I described it in the moment was like pressure releasing, like a valve turning off. Because like it's been something that I've wanted to do for so long, and like every season where I just like didn't quite do it, or I just fell a little bit short. A little bit of pressure would build going into the next year, and a little bit of pressure would build, and like I just felt like this immense feeling of like relief, like finally all of this pressure, all of this expectation finally starting to like come out. So like more than anything, I was just tired, mentally exhausted. You can probably see in the footage that I'm not putting sentences together at that point. I'm just like barely speaking English, but it took like probably another 2 days before it even set in for me. I was still like in disbelief for the next 48 hours.
Yeah, we saw the most dramatic Broski reaction of all time, of you putting your head in your hands for a moment and then saying, wow. Wow, I've been waiting for this for so long. You know, so much emotion there.
We've all got our strengths and weaknesses in this world, and popping off, unfortunately, at the stat creator of my life, I did not invest a single stat point into that one, so I'll work on that one going forward, maybe.
I still think the reaction is very relatable, especially to any competitor, because I've had other tournament wins in my life where I think it's a similar reaction where it's just like relief, because I think competition is stress, and at the end of it, knowing that you've done it is just, it's almost like a Thanos sitting in his garden after.
That's a good way to describe it. I definitely felt like that. I was waking up on a pleased universe for sure.
Right. Not, killing half the life in the universe, but, similarly achieving a goal you've worked so long to make
worst
real.
Metaphor ever. Asked to leave FGC. Sorry, go on.
Well, there's something to go on to. I just want to say, congratulations once again. Thank you. Have Capcom Cup coming up now. What is Broski up to? I know we have you just qualified for Capcom Cup, major balance patch, content creation's going crazy. I know right now you're busy as hell. Is there anything next before the final stretch to Capcom Cup? Any plans? Any expectations? What are you thinking now?
At the moment, I'm just kind of chilling. I want to take a little bit of not a break from the game. Like I'm still streaming and stuff, but I'm not really practicing super hard at the moment. I'm giving myself like a week or two of just doing whatever. Pretty low stakes, but I'll probably be back on like the serious grind pretty soon once the sort of Capcom, especially because right now we still don't have the full Capcom Cup draw to worry about. I have no idea who I could be playing. Stuff like that will become more of a focus in the near future. In terms of stuff that I'm doing, like Street Fighter stuff, I mean, Kings of the World is next week. But I'm actually not going to compete in that. I'm just going to go and spectate because I want to. I want to watch everyone else stressing and fighting for their lives while I'm just like sitting back, drink in hand, chilling, watching the chaos ensue. I'm gonna take pleasure in everyone else's misfortune for once. It's my turn. I've earned that right.
Absolutely, you've absolutely earned it. That's the de facto LCQ now for the Capcom Cup too. So everyone loves to join the chaos, and now you can enjoy it from the audience instead of being stressed along with everyone else. And you've absolutely earned it. Well, that's about it. That's all I had. Thanks so much for coming on the show. That was a great conversation, Broski.
Thanks for having me, man. Thanks very much.